Kicking off the list at number 10, the Ringmaster. Issue 3 of the Incredible Hulk back in Volume 1, we see the Hulk take on the Ringmaster. Will the mighty Hulk be a match for the Ringmaster? Well, apparently, yeah. He takes on a whole circus of crime who, might I add, do not have any superpowers, but right off the bat, the Human Cannonball gets the Hulk quite good. The Human Cannonball, just a regular guy with a makeshift hammer. This dude's spine would fold on impact if he cannonballed into the Incredible Hulk, so already I'm upset. And then it gets worse. A regular guy with a fireman's hose blasts the Hulk, and then he goes down, this time for good. I mean, I know the Hulk's mind was being toyed with here a bit, but the fact that a crime circus was able to best him in the first place, not okay. Not okay. Number 9, Doc Ock. In Eric Larson's 1992 Spider-Man run, issue 19 titled Revenge of the Sinister Six showed us a more powerful version of Doc Ock because he had new fancier arms. In fact, the whole crew had the jump on Peter at this point. He was for sure in need of backup. And right on cue, the Hulk smashes through the floor, just sending wood chips all over the damn place. Already such a mess. And he's coming in hot too. The Hulk says knock knock when he busts out of the floor. That is so badass. First he flicks Shocker out of the way, gives him the finger, literally, and then he tosses Mysterio back to sleep. And then when he goes to handle Doc Ock, he's caught off guard from his unbreakable arms with limitless power. Doc Ock had the upper hand, or 4 upper hands, I guess, in this case. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. No sweat, but it does help us out quite a bit. I'm not going to waste any more time. Thank you so much. For the best. Back to this list. Number 8, the Hulk Killer. With a name like that, you already know how this one's going to end. Created by Sam Stearns, the leader, Hulk Killer first appeared in Tales to Astonish, issue 86. Some detectives are going through the leader's notes. They're finding out that he's created these humanoids, but the Hulk destroyed them all but one. This humanoid was built specifically to take down the Hulk, so the cops call in General Ross. They figure this ought to be an asset in some way, shape, or form for the government, but if only they could bring it to life, because, you know, what would possibly go wrong? So they bring him to life, and it all goes wrong. He just leaves, he walks right out of the building, not even fazed one bit by the bullets, of course. Then the Hulk arrives, they battle it out, and they break their surroundings, but Hulk Killer just simply absorbs all these hits. Next, Hulk Killer beats Hulk so hard, he reverts back into his banner form. It's embarrassing. Number 7, Juggernaut. Kane Marco has been one of Marvel's biggest and baddest since his first appearance in X-Men issue 12. Once Marco came into contact with a gem, he then obtained the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Literally. The Hulk on average can beat Juggernaut, but in Incredible Hulk issue 402, Hulk bumps into this Jack dude who he realizes is not just an ordinary construction worker after all, rather it's Marco. Hulk thinks he has him. He tries to save Juggernaut's life after he falls into quicksand, but then he tries to pull Hulk in as well, so Hulk's like, alright, forget it, I'm gonna let you sink. See ya. Then of course he popped out of the quicksand and the beating continued, and it kept going and going, and the Hulk went down until he was almost dead. And that's when Red Skull stepped in and told Kane that was enough beating for now. Number 6, Zax. Making its first appearance in the Incredible Hulk issue 166, the Thing from the Dynamo was originally the result of an accident that happened at Edison Nuclear Power Plant. When a group of criminals tried to power off New York City, it went south, you know, the toughest gang in town, shutting down the power during Game of Thrones. That's truly, truly awful. Keep it up, guys. So guns started blazing and it caused this massive chain reaction in the atomic reactor, and then this living energy then absorbed them, and then soon took a humanoid form with a villain voice as well, of course. Zax absorbs the electricity from its victims' minds as well, so it gains their thoughts. Hawkeye comes in with a convenient foam arrow. In fact, Hawkeye's aim saved the day here, but they don't give him credit. They actually give the Hulk the credit, which is pretty rough. But don't worry, Hulk got what was coming from Zax when General Ross merged with the living energy and then beat down Hulk and Rick Jones. Ross was actually about to finish the pair off, but Zax's personality came back and then he flew off. That was a close call, Banner. A little too close. Number 5, Brian Banner. The father of Bruce Banner was honestly a pretty horrible guy. He killed Bruce's mother is honestly pure evil, and he of course was locked away for 15 years afterwards, and then when him and Bruce reunited down the road, Bruce accidentally killed him. Yikes. Now this isn't the end of his story though, because during the Chaos War storyline in Incredible Hulk's issue 619, his dad comes back as a Hulk demon who would get stronger the angrier Banner got. Now obviously this is a traumatic experience, going down memory lane can hurt quite a bit, so this demon Hulk dad would have finished off Bruce if Jarella didn't step in to save the day. Bruce has the brain and Brian's got the pain. The Banners are a wild bunch. Number 4. Horfin. Born the offspring of a frost giant and Fenris, Horfin first appeared in The Incredible Hulk issue 422. When the Warriors 3 and the Hulk were going after Agamemnon, they followed them to Singard Castle. Horfin was created purely to guard this castle, so now the Hulk has to fight a frost wolf. And this is pretty intimidating because when the frost giant Singard himself unleashes Horfin, the order was to kill the Hulk right off the bat. No warning, nothing. Just go eat him. Bye, go. And it did. Yeah, I did mention this wolf was incredibly big, right? What a snack. Number 3, Pit. Image Comics introduced Pit in Youngblood issue 4. It was their version of the Hulk. He's an alien-human hybrid created by the Creed as a literal death machine. So 5 years later, Marvel gave the fans the ultimate battle and released Hulk Pit Reality Check. This was just 50 pages of punching and smashing and kicking. It's exactly what you would expect and want. But Pit remained on top for the most part of this fight, and you gotta include Image Comics whenever we can, because Pit is a treat. He's also drooling and jacked. He's just a nightmare. I would never want to deal with him. Number 2, Thanos. This is the only movie reference in this list, but I do have to include it. The time Thanos punched the Hulk in the neck so hard that the beast straight up retired. Avengers Infinity War, directed by the lovely Russo brothers, before the title card even pops up in the movie, before it's like, bam, Avengers, the Incredible Hulk is gone. You don't see him anymore. He pops out and tries to get the upper hand on Thanos, and without even using the Power Stone, Thanos rock and boppers his neck. Now, we don't see the Hulk after this for 5 whole years. And even then, he's like taking selfies and dabbing. It's not the same at all. And finally, number 1, Maestro. Maestro comes from an alternate future on Earth 9200, the Future Imperfect storyline. Now this takes place 90 years in the future, and that Hulk had basically just absorbed all this radiation from our fallen planet over time. He gets stronger, and unfortunately he also gets smarter. This isn't a dumb Hulk that gets, hosed down at a circus. This is the Maestro we're talking about. So our Incredible Hulk goes to fight him, but on the way into the massive city of Dystopia, appropriately named, Hulk finds all these weapons and artifacts from all of our fallen heroes. This new world was much harder to survive in, even with superpowers. And that's when Hulk meets up with his old friend, Rick Jones. Rick fills Banner in that basically everybody's dead except for those residing in Maestro's dystopia. He would keep the radiation level low enough for people to survive, but he would also keep it high enough for him to continue being powered up. Maestro ends up Minecrafting his way to Jones' secret base, and the two Hulks come face to face. Now part 2 of the story is obviously just a massive fight. Maestro is terrifying. He calls Banner out on a bluff, and then he just tosses a lady to smithereens. Like, he actually doesn't care. He'll kill anybody in his way. It's terrifying. Hulk hits him where the sun doesn't shine, and Maestro sneaks up and breaks his neck, ending the battle and the story just like that.
Number 10, Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores, which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back, and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9, Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Sabretooth. Sabretooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabretooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabretooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabretooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabretooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return having been resurrected by the Hand to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. Spore. While Spore was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against Spore. Spore appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the drug that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that drug was kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. Spore, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing Spore permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madeline Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madeline Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madeline Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or his life, because in this story, Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This is when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix Endsong, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story. Number 10. Nightmare. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's most iconic villains. In fact, he was the first appearing alongside Doctor Strange in his first appearance. He has done quite a few things to threaten the Earth even while Strange has reigned as Sorcerer Supreme. But aside from that, he's also at one point succeeded in pushing Strange to his limits. During Last Defenders issue number 3, Strange returns to Greenwich Village in New York City to defend it against a stampede from Nightmare's dream realm. Unfortunately, at this point, he's too weak and exhausted to successfully defend against the stampede. Fortunately though, Damon Hellstrom arrives on the scene to lend a hand. But if it weren't for Hellstrom, Strange would surely have been trodden into some pretty dead meat by those dream horses. Woo! Number 9. Baron Mordo. Baron Mordo is another famous villain of Dr. Stephen Strange. While generally Strange is the one who comes out on top, Mordo had actually been plaguing Stephen well before he was ever Sorcerer Supreme, and even before he knew about the existence of Mordo or the Ancient One. Back when Mordo was the Ancient One's disciple, information was actually shared with him of how Stephen Strange was predicted to become the Ancient One's successor as Sorcerer Supreme. Pretty jealous, Mordo began to plague the then child Stephen Strange with nightmares, creating and utilizing a psychic construct. Eventually the Ancient One discovered this and ended Mordo's schemes, but Stephen would continue to be plagued by nightmares throughout his life due to the psychic construct within his mind. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you are loving this channel and you want to show us some love somewhere else, head on over to Facebook, click that follow, click that like, help us on out. Number 8. MCU Caecilius. Technically, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Caecilius won the day. He ultimately lost the war though, as his plan didn't go quite as he'd hoped. But he was successful in opening up a gateway to the Dark Dimension, with which Dormammu could basically use to enter Earth, and our dimension here. Good old Earth 9999999. How many nines is in it? I forget. That reality. At least this is what Caecilius tried to do. In the end, Dormammu was stopped by Doctor Strange, who used his Eye of Agamotto to create a time loop that Dormammu would be forever trapped in until or unless he gave up and decided to leave Earth alone, which did end up happening after countless deaths of Doctor Strange, which also possibly created an infinite number of alternate paths across the multiverse and realities where Strange may actually be dead and where Dormammu was victorious. Who knows? While Strange beat Dormammu and ultimately Caecilius in the end, he was unable to stop the villain from succeeding in his mission to summon Dormammu to Earth. And a win, even if it isn't the final word, is still a win. And in Caecilius' case, he should have been more careful for what he wished for, because he also kind of got what he wanted, which was to live forever, but in pain in the Dark Dimension, so not so great. not ideal. Number 7. Loki. Loki has managed to pull the wool over Stephen's eyes on more than one occasion. At one point during one of their very first encounters, he managed to trick Strange into thinking that Loki's brother Thor was evil, causing Strange to basically confiscate Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. However, Strange soon realized the deception and as such helped Thor instead to defeat his tricksy brother Loki. More recently in the comics, Doctor Strange ended up duped by Loki when the trickster god believed he would be more well suited to the role of Sorcerer Supreme, and managed to basically trick Strange out of the role using extremely realistic illusions and deceptive ploys. Stephen spent a good amount of time when he was no longer Sorcerer Supreme working as a veterinarian, which is how he met Bats, who would later become his ghostly doggo companion. Number 6. Caecilius. But this time from the comics. Caecilius, I would say, is one of Strange's greatest villains. Despite just being the protege or disciple of Baron Mordo in the comics, he still managed to defeat Doctor Strange in the ultimate way, by killing him. Although it seems that Strange wasn't completely caught unawares, as he had a plan in place should this happen, which allowed him to solve the mystery of his own death. And although Caecilius may have killed Strange, Doctor Strange ended up coming out on top despite the defeat, as his older self managed to avenge his death, dealing Caecilius a worser fate. His older self, his younger self that's from the past, it's like older but younger. It's confusing. Caecilius in essence wasn't just killed here, by the way. He was seemingly erased when older or past Doctor Strange, solving the mystery, decided to use Caecilius to bring back his main continuity self, temporarily at least, casting a healing spell which basically transformed Caecilius into Strange, in essence resurrecting the version of him that Caecilius had killed. But that's not very good for him, because then he's like, now I'm the person I killed that I hated the most. Shucks. Number 5. Dormammu. Although these two have fought on multiple occasions, with Doctor Strange managing to best or beat Dormammu, especially if he is on Earth and outside of the Dark Dimension, where he is the most powerful, when they first fought, Dormammu was in the Dark Dimension, and Strange was just kinda starting out as well, so he wasn't at max power. He was sent to the Dark Dimension to battle Dormammu in order to save the world by the Ancient One, who was basically too weak to do battle with Dormammu at the time. Stephen went taking his place, but also proved to be not really strong enough to defeat Dormammu. Instead, Stephen found a way around that battle, similar to his approach in the MCU. However, instead of trapping Dormammu in a time loop, Stephen at this point actually didn't even have the Eye of Agamotto, I don't believe, in the comics. He decided to help him out in order to beat him. You see, Dormammu had to expend energy to maintain a barrier in the Dark Dimension which kept out the mindless ones, and during their battle the distraction of the fight had caused him to drop that barrier. With the mindless ones on the loose, Stephen offered to help restore the barrier and keep the mindless ones out, and Dormammu begrudgingly promised that he would give up his attempt to invade Earth as a result. At least this time. Number 4. Enchantress. Oddly enough, despite both being very much tied to the world of magic over at Marvel Comics, Doctor Strange has not really had many battles against Enchantress. However, during the Acts of Vengeance crossover event, the two did end up getting matched up for a battle in his series, Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme. In issue number 12, we see these two face off, and Enchantress, along with Executioner, proved to be too much for Strange to handle. First of all, he is successfully seduced into attending a meeting with Amora the Enchantress in the evening, not even seemingly recognizing her as the Enchantress previous to her reveal, and even though people are basically like, don't go there, he does it anyways. Then they begin to battle, and Enchantress and Executioner's Asgardian heritage makes them seemingly too much for Strange to handle. Fortunately, Clea shows up just in time to basically save his magic butt. Number 3. Ultimate Dormammu. Ultimate Dormammu pretty much has the ultimate victory against Doctor Strange on Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. He manages to kill Doctor Strange straight up, strangling him with his sash until his head in essence pops off. However, it should also be noted that this Doctor Strange is not the exact counterpart to Earth 616's Doctor Strange. This is actually Stephen Strange Jr., Strange's son, his son with Clea no less. In the Ultimate Universe, Doctor Strange Sr. disappeared many years ago, vanishing without a trace, and no one knows what happened to him. Although Strange Jr. was raised normally on Earth without magic by his mother Clea, he eventually found his way back to it and would go on to become the new Sorcerer Supreme, following in both his father and his mother's more magical footsteps. Unfortunately too, because then he dies as a result of that. Whoops. Number 2. The Undying Ones. The Undying Ones are extremely strong and powerful demonic beings who serve the Nameless One, seemingly inspired by monsters of Lovecraftian design. While Steven has fought against them before and succeeded, initially when dealing with them, even despite besting them, they would end up costing him something. Either killing those he sought to protect, or just managing to succeed in whatever other devious mission they were up to, just as Doctor Strange arrived to stop them. Because of their ability to be a step ahead, at one point Doctor Strange even gets trapped in their dimension, sacrificing himself in order to close off a portal to Earth. Staying behind, Strange would spend some time imprisoned in their dimension until such a time as the Hulk arrived there, stumbled upon him, and then the two were able to fight their way out due to the sacrifice of someone else staying behind. Strange became imprisoned in Submariner issue number 22 from the 1968 series. If you don't recognize Steven here, this is because it was back in the day when he used to wear a mask in an attempt to hide his identity from his enemies. Yeah, that was a whole thing, and at one point to maintain that identity, he actually had his name like magically changed to Steven Saunders. It's the whole time. Number 1. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the dark alternate version of Strange from the alternate MCU reality, appearing in the What If episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. The result apparently would be that Doctor Strange would become obsessed with getting enough power so that he could bring back his love Christine Palmer and somehow avoid her death. Unfortunately, in bringing Christine back, he also caused the destruction of his universe, as her death was considered an absolute point in time, not something that you can basically mess with. In order to even bring Christine back, Strange would have to face off against himself, who was the final defense against what the darker Strange was basically attempting to do here. Strange Supreme defeated himself in the end, absorbing him and resurrecting Christine, which brought about the end of the universe. But hey, he won the fight. Number 10. Darkseid is Called. In the Snyder Cut of the DCEU film Justice League, we learn that the heroes don't actually save the day. In the original version of the tale, they kinda lose and are too late to prevent the Mother Box from calling out to Darkseid, who arrives on Earth. The Mother Box explodes, seemingly killing our heroes. However, there is one hope left. While technically in this timeline they lose, Barry Allen, aka The Flash, manages to use his superpowers to race beyond the speed of light, turning back time and giving everyone a second chance. Also showcasing how much of a powerhouse the hero can be, and making him one of the most powerful superheroes on the team in this version of the story. So although for a moment they lost, The Flash gives the team a second chance, and this time they do manage to save the day, with Cyborg preventing the Mother Boxes from coming together and reaching out across the cosmos with Superman's help, and Aquaman and Wonder Woman defeating Steppenwolf, who dies while being sent back through the portal to Darkseid on Apocalypse. But that first time around, they all likely died. Number 9. Captain Britain vs. Iska. The Ten of Swords tournament, or the Otherworld tournament, was not what many expected, especially when it came to how poorly our friends over on Krakoa did. I mean, after all, they were supposed to be the heroes in this event, as they faced off against their villainous mutant brethren of Arakko, who were also under the influence of the Amenthi demons led by Annihilation. And it all started with Krakoa's ability to lose hard on that very first battle in this story. I don't know about you, but I was pretty shook after reading that first fight when I was reading this as it was all coming out. The fight went down between Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, representing Krakoa, and Iska the Unbeaten, a champion of Arakko. The fight lasted 4 pages, and Betsy was swiftly and easily defeated by Iska, with both her sword and herself being shattered into pieces. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show some support for us over on another platform, head on over to Facebook, where you can give us a like, a follow. We really appreciate it when you do, and we have lots of exclusive content coming your way over there, so yes. Number 8. A League of One. Superheroes don't always lose to supervillains in the comics. In the case of the JLA story A League of One, this time around the League is actually defeated by one of their own, Wonder Woman. However, Wonder Woman doesn't do this to actually cause them harm or kill them, but simply to get them out of the way. This is because the League is facing a dragon, and there's basically a prophecy surrounding that fight that it will cost the band of heroes their lives. Wonder Woman not only manages to defeat the League, even disposing of Superman, who she weakens and then sends on a mission to save the others who she's left in danger, but also does manage to sidestep her doomed fate. Sort of. Wonder Woman was willing to die in the League's place, hoping to spare the rest of the team, but in taking on the dragon by herself, she manages to actually avoid dying. at least dying permanently. She dies momentarily, but is revived by Superman, who arrives just in time to bring her back from the brink of death by giving her life-saving CPR. So she died, but only for a minute. Number 7. Emperor Doom. In this story, Dr. Doom succeeds in taking over the world by using the powers of the Purple Man, who he keeps as his prisoner. This might sound like a lot to put on Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, whose powers aren't generally depicted as being capable of working on a global scale. However, Doom manages to boost Purple Man's power while also taking it for himself by trapping him within a large psychoprism prison. Surprisingly, Earth actually does pretty well under the rule of Doom. Hunger, crime, and war are pretty much all eradicated under his rule, but at the high cost, of course, of free will of every individual on the planet. In the end, Doom isn't defeated, but actually chooses to relinquish control, becoming bored of the monotony of ruling without any opposition. Number 6. Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel event, Ra's al Ghul manages to use Batman's own intel and files on the Justice League to defeat them. No, really. Batman, being the prepared and paranoid man that he is, basically is revealed to have kept files on each member of the Justice League, noting their weaknesses and also containing contingency plans for how to best defeat them should they ever turn to the side of evil. Ra's gains access to Batman's systems and is able to retrieve these detailed files and plans via his daughter Talia. He uses this information to take on and defeat all members of the Justice League, even managing to seemingly distract Batman by robbing the graves of his parents. In the end, the Justice League recover and win the day, but they are none too pleased with Batman, whose secret intel in essence almost single-handedly allowed Al Ghul to destroy the whole team. Number 5. Days of Future Past. In the Days of Future Past reality, Sentinels rule over North America. Here, many mutants are eliminated with only a few managing to survive, but still with many of them being kept in camps where they are worked until they die and are branded with an M tattoo on their face, so they will forever be recognized as a lowly mutant, unable to escape prosecution. Even many superheroes have been killed in this reality of Earth 811 because they attempted to protect mutants and put a stop on the Sentinels' reign, which also made them targets. One of the main reasons why the Sentinels are successful in taking over in this story is because of the deaths of Senator Robert Kelly, Professor Charles Xavier, and Moira McTaggart, who were all killed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Number 4. Death of the Justice League. The Death of the Justice League has kicked off as of issue 75 of the current Justice League series, which started back in 2018, and wow, it is rough. What happens to the Justice League? Well, they face off against Pariah, who himself is from one of the first worlds to be targeted during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was cursed with basically watching all these worlds die again and again, unable to stop it, despite being one of the first people to warn everyone that Crisis on Infinite Earths was coming. Now, with the multiverse reset following the events of Death Metal, Pariah claims that he sees the signs of the crisis happening again. Desperate to prevent this, his plan is to wipe the slate clean when it comes to the heroes, so that the possible new anti-monitor who will come into existence will have no reason to continue with the crisis. Seems like some flawed logic to me, but this man has also seen some, so I understand his desperation to do whatever he thinks will work when it comes to avoiding another crisis. Number 3. Age of Apocalypse. While the Age of Apocalypse does eventually end, this reality is based on the whole idea of what the world would be like if the big bad villain won, and by big bad villain, we of course mean Apocalypse this time around. Which is precisely what happens here. These events are actually all set into motion by Legion, who accidentally causes the death of his father, Professor X. Legion traveled back in time with a plan to kill Magneto, but Professor X shields Magneto against Legion's attack, dying instead in his place. Apocalypse ends up attempting to take over the world earlier on in his timeline in this universe, the AOA reality of Earth 295. Magneto is the only one who attempts to oppose Apocalypse, and as such, En-Sabah-Nur is mainly successful in his attempt for world domination. Apocalypse would oppress humanity, seeing superpowered beings as superior, and it would be many years before his reign of terror was ended. Number 2. Final Crisis. Which actually apparently wasn't so final, as we have another crisis headed our way now, known as Dark Crisis. But regardless of whether or not it was actually final, Final Crisis was definitely a bad time for Earth. In this story, Darkseid actually succeeds in obtaining and releasing the anti-life equation on Earth. He puts it on the internet where it can be easily seen and then spread. Those who see it basically lose their will to live, becoming enslaved to Darkseid and his will, instead of having their own. Well, in the end, the heroes do manage to break free from the influence of Darkseid and the anti-life equation, invasion, defeating Darkseid in the end with a Radion bullet, Darkseid still manages to enslave all of Earth and many of its heroes, for a time being seen as the victor. Number 1. Life 9 of Moira X. Well, this life in the end seemingly gave mutants the information needed to beat the rise of the Sentinels and of AI, it also was a world where they had lost much. If anything, it actually set the stage for the reset of Moira's 10th life, where mutants supposedly won. However, even that victory would be revealed to be more complicated, as Moira's true motives were revealed during the events of the 2021 Inferno series, and it turns out her motives were actually to kinda end mutant kind in a nicer way. Still, just taking this world and this continuity as it is, the mutants here have almost all been exterminated. In this life, Moira joined forces with Apocalypse in an attempt to make a final stand against the all-powerful Nimrod. They would not be successful in killing Nimrod, who had killed so many mutants and had also worked to oppress the humans as well. They would only manage to retrieve the information on how and when the Nimrod came to be, allowing them to succeed, hopefully, in Moira's 10th life, where she and mutant kind had failed in her 9th. However, we also know that that didn't really work out because Nimrod does exist in her 10th life, so basically are the mutants kinda screwed? I think maybe they are. Number 10. Iris West is killed by Professor Zoom. That's right, Professor Zoom actually succeeded at one point in killing the love of Barry Allen's life, Iris West. Eobard Thawne, how dare you? And it would only be fixed by a continuity reset basically. Well, and prior to that, Barry Allen basically dipping from his own reality to go live in the future of the 30th century with an alternate future version of Iris who was kinda made to just exist for him, having been reborn there. So it's kinda like his Iris but also not, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I mean, fair enough, it's pretty confusing. Iris died after Barry and Iris were married, and after she knew about his secret identity. Professor Zoom, as he was known then, ended up simply finding Iris at a party and phasing his hand through her head to kill her instantly. This loss hurt Barry so much that later on, when he found love with Fiona Webb, who he was engaged to marry, when Professor Zoom attacked them on their wedding day, Barry could not take it and responded by killing the villain. It was after this and a following trial for Barry Allen, where he was actually charged with manslaughter because, you know, he killed Thawne, that Barry left the main reality to go be happy with the Iris of the 30th century. Although that would all get wiped away following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but anyways, ain't that just how it goes when crises come a-knockin'. Number 9. Sisterhood of Mutants. In case you were wondering what was going on in the thumbnail from our previous top 10 times superheroes lost list, I'm here to answer that for you now. What's going on there is Lady Mastermind is in essence keeping Emma Frost trapped in kind of like an illusion, so Emma's like trapped in her own mind. Don't worry though, the White Queen's defeat would only be temporary. This was during the creation of the villainous mutant team known as the Sisterhood of Mutants. Yeah, you might know about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but did you know there is a sisterhood too? It was led by none other than the Goblin Queen herself, Madeline Pryor, who had a plan for how to deal with everyone as she invaded the X-Men's headquarters. Her plan for Emma was for Lady Mastermind to keep Frost trapped within her own mind by using illusions. This, by the way, is also at a time where Emma Frost is actually one of the good guys, not the bad guys, just to be clear. However, Emma would ultimately fight back against Lady Mastermind and find a way out of this when she surprised Mastermind with her new secondary mutation, her diamond form, which makes her immune to any kind of psionic attack. Emma also kicked butt in her diamond form, landing blows that knocked Lady Mastermind into next week. Yeah, I would not want to be hit by a diamond form Emma Frost. That would hurt a lot. Diamonds are really painful, I'm sure, to be punched with. I mean, I assume a lot of things are, but diamonds especially. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want another list where we talk about the times the superheroes lost, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be able to come up with many of them, but the more I do these lists, the more things come into my mind about all of the times superheroes have lost. So let me know in the comments and maybe we'll do a part 3. Number 8. Dark Avengers. Sometimes heroes lose, not when villains win against them, but just when villains win in general. That was in essence the case with what happened when it came to the creation of the Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were the team of Norman Osborn, who probably just called them, you know, Avengers. No dark implications from his side. That would be pretty suspicious if it's like, hey guys, look at my team, these are the Dark Avengers. Don't worry, they're totally great people and none of them are villains. Don't worry about it. seems a little suspect. Their editorial name though was definitely the Dark Avengers from a reader's standpoint, so that's how we know them. This team of villains marketed as heroes came to be after Osborn was given the reins to create his own organization after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why Norman Osborn, formerly known as Major Villain Green Goblin? Because at the time, he was being celebrated as a hero after defeating Queen Veronki, leader of the Skrull secret invasion on live television broadcast. Norman created his own organization known as Hammer, which was an acronym that he just liked. It actually doesn't even stand for anything. He was just like, I like the name Hammer. Make that make sense, let's not worry about it. He also created his own evil Avengers team known as the Dark Avengers during a period referred to as Dark Reign. So if you want to go check it out, you can look up Dark Avengers, you can look up Dark Reign, you can read some cool stuff. Number 7. Death of Green Arrow. Ollie has died a few times, but one of the most iconic deaths of Green Arrow, I would say, comes from the late 80s to 90s series of Green Arrow. Here in issues number 100 to 101, while Oliver Queen was working to infiltrate a team of eco-terrorists, he finds himself tangled up in one of their plots and is one of the few people who can basically stop a bomb from going off and destroying Metropolis. Well, he can stop it going off in Metropolis, I should say. He can't necessarily stop it from going off, unfortunately. He ends up getting his arm stuck in the detonation chamber and is unable to remove it without the bomb going off. Superman shows up and somehow this ends up being a problem even Superman can't solve. Superman! In the end, Green Arrow chooses to sacrifice himself to protect the people of Metropolis rather than still save the people of Metropolis, but instead just lose his arm instead of, losing his whole life. I mean, okay. I personally just think DC really wanted to kill Oliver Queen for some reason at this point, because I think Superman had some plans prior to Ollie making the bomb go boom that could have, maybe worked. Bomb 1, Queen 0, I guess. Number 6. Death of Thor. You could say the death of Thor is basically inevitable. When it comes to the world of the Norse gods of Asgard, many of their demises are ruled by prophetic fate. Thor is no exception. We learn this in his fight against his uncle, Kull Borson, the Serpent, in Fear Itself. During the Fear Itself event, Kull Borson escapes from his prison and rises again. The condemned and long imprisoned brother of Odin once more rises to power by feeding on the fear of the people of Earth, naming his own champions who are each gifted a hammer. Thor in turn is destined to battle his uncle and in so doing unfortunately die. Despite Odin's protests at his son attempting to save Midgard, Thor does do battle with the Serpent, saving Midgard, aka Earth, but at the cost of his own life. That is, of course, until he's next resurrected, as so often happens with our favorite heroes in comics. Sometimes you just gotta defeat a Demogorge and then you're back to life. You know how it goes. Man, comics. Number 5. DC vs. Vampires. DC vs. Vampires is another monster mashup of an alternate reality where the heroes of that world are overrun by monsters. In this case, the monsters being, you guessed it, vampires. The loses start, of course, with the very first issue, as the premise for this tale is set up. Okay. Premise. Mary Queen of Blood has been killed, and despite being a villain, she was the only one holding back vampires from all-out war. Andrew Bennett, aka I Vampire, attempts to hunt her killers down in order to find out what is going on and why, and discovers a plot of vampire kind to take over Earth, not just starting a war, but almost completely eradicating the human race, at least eradicating their powers. The plan involves taking over the planet, subjugating the human population, and keeping them around only to treat them basically like cattle. Andrew ends up getting proof, a vial of one survivor's blood, Lex Luthor, which also seems to be weaponized against vampires. He also then decides to head out to the Justice League to warn them, but in the end he is defeated by an already turned Hal Jordan. Hal's evil again, oh gosh, who would have guessed? And that's just the beginning of the story, so it gets a lot more vampires taking over the world, if you like that jam. I personally like that jam. I'm like, yeah, put me in that jam. I like when vampires take over the world. Let's go. Number 4. Purple Man for President. Purple Man's presidency takes place in an alternate reality of Earth 460, and it's actually his rise to power that also creates another alternate universe, a very famous one, in fact, you could say. The reality of Earth 311, aka the 1602 reality. This is because Purple Man initially is imprisoning and killing all heroes alive who still oppose him. But with Captain America, Kilgrave sees a greater threat there. If he kills Cap, Cap will basically become a martyr to the people. So instead, Purple Man simply removes Cap completely from the playing board, but not in such a way that the populace can't rally around, Cap's defeat or death. Kilgrave sends Rogers back to the year 1599, and thereby accidentally creates a superhero reality set in the past. that of 1602. Number 3. Death metal. During death metal, our heroes lost hardcore. That is before they won, but still, they lost at one point. They are lucky they were permitted to stick around, as that is the only way they were able to come back from such a dark place. Pun intended. Because you know it's Dark Knight's death metal. Get it? I'll just see myself out. During death metal, the trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and of course Batman ended up going against a Batman Who Laughs and his cohort Persephone. In the end, the first time around anyways, they lost and the world became reshaped temporarily in a darker image. The trinity were split up, with Wonder Woman reluctantly agreeing to join Batman Who Laughs. She didn't really have much of a choice. That's how she actually got her Chainsaw of Truth though, which I love that Chainsaw of Truth, it's so cool. And that's also how in the end the trinity was able to survive until a point that they could each get free and then basically rejoin back up with one another. Ultimately, Wonder Woman would sacrifice herself to save the multiverse, banishing the dark multiverse and restarting everything, setting it right again after getting a glimpse into the potential future, which we would know as Future State. But before that happened, it seemed as though the core JLA members would be trapped and defeated forever. It was a pretty hopeless time for a little bit there. Number 2. Time runs out. In some cases, antagonists aren't so much people aiming to defeat heroes, but are instead simply seeming natural occurring disasters which cannot be stopped. Sometimes that's the villain of the story. No matter how hard our heroes try, they just can't beat it. That is essentially how Time Runs Out ends, with Iron Man and Captain America being crushed by the unavoidable doom that is the Incursions. Literally crushed. The final incursion smooshed Earth 616 and Earth 1610 together, seemingly ending both universes. However, in the end, Doctor Doom would step up to the plate, accepting the power of Molecule Man and defying the Beyonders by saving the multiverse and creating his own battle world. But before all of that went down, everyone was trying to figure out how to stop these incursions, and ultimately were pretty much failing at doing so. In the end, it came down to infighting between Tony and Steve as everyone else prepared their lifeboats, hoping to preserve at least a few of the best of them. As Steve blamed Tony and the two fought on, the incursions arrived, squishing them and seemingly, at least momentarily, ending everything, but not so much in the end. Number 1. Deceased. If you thought Marvel Zombies was bleak, wait till you head to the DC version of that reality, Deceased. Here, instead of everyone being infected by a traditional zombie virus, it's more comic codified than that. In Deceased, the heroes and villains of the world instead become overtaken by the anti-life equation, which in this case turns them into hyper-violent, seemingly mindless beings driven only by rage. Basically, different versions of zombies. Poor Cyborg even ends up kind of as patient zero in this, spreading said virus to the rest of the population and infecting many beloved heroes the world over. Number 10. One Punch! One of the wildest times I can think of when it comes to a hero getting put in their place would be when Guy Gardner challenged Batman for leadership of the Justice League. Challenging Batman to a fistfight, Guy removed his Green Lantern ring, talking a big game before getting knocked out with one punch. I mean, Guy Gardner normally with his Green Lantern power could easily overwhelm and defeat Batman, let's be real here. But of course Guy's ego would be his weakness here, thinking he could take on Batman without his powers. I mean, Batman might be a human, but he's probably one of the most skilled, experienced, and honestly smartest humans around. So how Guy thought he could stand a chance against him, I honestly have no idea. Although I would have expected him to last a little longer in the fight than about 2 seconds at least. Quite embarrassing. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Now get out of that stupid body. I don't know why I said it like that. Could you imagine if Jean said it that way? Also, fun fact, all of my points here are quotes, so if you want to try to guess where they're from before I tell you, feel free in the comments. While there is the what if where Emma gets the Phoenix Force, this isn't the only time that this actually happened. In fact, this has also happened in the main continuity when the Phoenix returned to Earth. For a brief time in Phoenix Endsong, Emma was the Phoenix's host. However, this didn't last too long, as Jean was returned to collect the Phoenix and take it back, as it was considered to be a piece of herself. And of course, seeing that it was too much power for Emma and that it was corrupting her. Emma thought that she could handle the Phoenix Force until Jean came and put her in her place, reminding her that actually, she couldn't. And while insulting her and the Phoenix, also helping to set her and the Phoenix free again from one another. Number 8. Good luck, Pine Martin. I don't know if Wolverine actually deserved this one, but it definitely is something that happened and it was brutal, so hey, we're gonna talk about it. Punisher in Marvel Knight's Punisher once teamed up with the old Knucklehead to take down a gang of little people. However, Punisher had his own approach to handling them that differed from Wolverine's. Basically, Punisher just wanted to completely destroy the gang, whereas Wolverine seemed more interested in bringing them to justice. Punisher thinks this is because Wolverine is also shorter in stature and is therefore somewhat allied with the gang, and this clouded his judgment. More likely, however, is the reasoning that Wolverine just found Punisher's approach to be simply too brutal. As punishment for this somewhat betrayal, Punisher proceeds to use and mistreat Wolverine severely, blasting off his face, allowing the gang to attempt to remove Logan's limbs, shooting him where the sun don't shine, and finally steamrolling the hero, all while ridiculing him verbally. Number 7. You know this is supposed to be unbreakable glass, right? This is a great one. While Spider-Man and Wolverine were both on the Avengers, they stayed at the Avengers Tower. This was when Peter and MJ were still married, and so MJ was staying there with them. However, after some bad press, MJ left their room in tears while Peter was still asleep. During his pursuit of MJ, he runs into Wolverine, who seems to have also heard the bad news. Wolverine insinuates that MJ might not have messed up so badly and probably wouldn't even be with Peter if she had some brains to go along with all that beauty. Peter's reaction is also additionally aggravated by the fact that the bad news in the press is suggesting that Tony Stark is basically having an affair with the married young actress. Frustrated and upset, Peter picks up Wolverine and tosses him out of an Avengers Tower window. That's really high up. Not only is that a long way down, but the windows are all apparently completely unbreakable, or at least they were designed to be. Ouch. Number 6. We're in my mindscape now. You might be surprised to hear that Emma Frost, who herself has her own list of misdeeds, was at a time the one to call out Professor X for his. Now, granted, if you've been following along with modern comics, then this might not surprise you too much, as a while back, it was basically established that Professor X is actually kind of one of the worst people sometimes. When you think about how he trained young students to basically fight, constantly putting them in danger, I mean, kind of makes sense. And then you also learn that the danger room he used to train them with became a sentient AI mutant itself, whose sentience he kind of just chose to ignore so he could keep using it to train young mutants. And when you consider how many times he's manipulated people's minds for reasons he deemed as necessary. I mean, in this case, Emma laid a trap for Charles in his golden boy Scott Summers, aka Cyclops' mind. With Scott's consent, of course, Emma knew that Charles would try to infiltrate Scott's mind, and when he did, she'd be there to give him a taste of his own medicine. And that is exactly what she did, shaming him and blaming him for much of the misfortune in Scott's past. Which, to be fair, kind of true. Emma's kind of right here. Number 5. Professor Xavier is a jerk. Honestly, I could probably just do a top 10 list like this just about Professor X. I love this moment. Maybe one of my favorite X-Men moments ever is when Kitty called out Professor X for being a jerk because he wouldn't let her join the X-Men team. Now, to be fair to Charles, he was doing this to protect Kitty, but to be fair to Kitty, Charles does have a history of training young students to literally go out on dangerous missions at his behest. So honestly, kind of fair. Also, just in general, Professor X can be a jerk, so Kitty wasn't really wrong here. Number 4. Are you angry because I was prepared to do what needed to be done, or because you weren't? Wow. I love this point. In issue number 39 of the 2011 Wonder Woman series, Wonder Woman calls out her teammates for not killing. This might seem strange to you, knowing that Wonder Woman is evidently a huge fan of love, hope, and justice, often trying to find a peaceful way to end conflicts. But at the end of the day, Diana is still an Amazon, and has also been the god of war. She is a warrior, so although she does believe in peaceful resolutions, there are times when she acknowledges that to protect innocence, sometimes blood must be shed. In this case, thousands of people were killed by an enemy who was using humans as food source for his bug-like alien queen, and Wonder Woman almost killed him for it, until she was stopped by Superman. Batman later reminds her that if this villain dies, the blood will be on Diana's hands, to which she retorts, "Are you angry because I was prepared to do what needed to be done, or because you weren't?" Calling out Bruce for how ridiculous his one rule really is. Which, to be fair, I'm kind of on Diana's side here. I feel like she's got some points. Sometimes some villains do need to be removed, I think. Sometimes. In this case, killed thousands of people. Number 3, don't let me out for a month, no matter what. I think this is probably one of the most heart-wrenching moments on our list of someone being put in his place. And while Alfred was the first one to kind of do it in this story, ultimately it's Batman who makes that final call. This happens before Bane had even appeared in comics, but the substance he uses, Venom, actually had. Batman is actually the first one to become a frequent user of the substance, turning to it to help his performance after losing a life on duty as Batman and being unable to apprehend the people behind that crime. However, after realizing he is becoming reliant on it to the point that he even considers ending Jim Gordon's life just to score more Venom, he decides to go cold turkey. While Alfred had quit briefly during this time, Batman calls him back to get his help with kicking the habit, asking Alfred to lock him in the Batcave for a month and not open the door no matter what. When he emerges, he's clean, recovered, and has a newfound sense of purpose. Also, if you were wondering, yes, he does have water and food down there, so he doesn't like starve himself for a month. Number 2, never imagined you actually had one of these. Oof. This is quite the deep insult from Kitty Pryde, who honestly sometimes can be as cold-hearted as Emma is known to be. At one point, Kitty ended up attacking Emma when she became the Phoenix, also merged with the remnants of Cassandra Nova's psyche. Granted, this all went down in a what-if story, to be clear, but one that is definitely based on a very real perception that the whole X-Men team and school staff have of each other. Proving how powerful she is, Kitty used her mutant phasing powers to stop Emma in her tracks, even as she was turning into her diamond form and even with the Phoenix Force. While Emma was attempting to fight against both the Phoenix and Cassandra Nova in her mind to drop her shields and basically surrender, Kitty snuck up behind her and phased her hand straight through Emma's back, reaching all the way through to the front of her and grabbing her heart along the way, phasing it right through Emma's body. Tossing Emma's heart onto the ground, Kitty then remarks how surprised she was to find out Emma actually had one. Now that is cold. Number 1, because of you, none of these things will ever happen. You know we had to talk about this one. Talk about putting someone in their place. That is exactly what the Watcher does, whose interaction with Beast here, aka Dr. Hank McCoy of the X-Men, served to inspire this very list. After some meddling with the timeline in an effort to bring back the young X-Men to show Cyclops the error of his ways, Beast is confronted by the Watcher. The Watcher gives him visions of his friends finding happiness in the world. When he says to the Watcher that he doesn't understand the meaning of his warning, as he himself does want his friends to be happy and feel loved, the Watcher responds saying that because of Beast's meddling with the timeline, these are visions of things that will actually never come to pass, entire realities that have been completely wiped out. Ashamed, Beast asks the Watcher for help to set things right again, to which the Watcher responds, "I am the Watcher, I do not act. And you disgust me, Hank McCoy." That's brutal, man. Ugh, I'd be so embarrassed if the Watcher said that to me. Number 10, I will never forgive you for this. Really, there are 2 moments in here where John Johns, aka Martian Manhunter, puts John Stewart, aka Green Lantern, in his place. But I'm going to be focusing on just one for now. Maybe if we do a part 3, I'll gotta tell you about the other one. In this instance, Martian Manhunter was on a mission with Green Lantern. They went to Xanshi to find and disarm a device that threatened to destroy the planet. They managed to find it, but when John Stewart decided to go it alone, seeing Martian Manhunter as kind of dead weight, as someone who was slowing him down, he ended up making the biggest mistake of his life. When he finds the device, he is prepared to destroy it, assured that with his Green Lantern ring, nothing can stop him from doing so, only to find out that it has been completely painted yellow, his one weakness. Without enough time to think of a solution, the device goes off, destroying the planet and all the life on it. Later, amidst the wreckage in the vacuum of space, John, who is still alive thanks to the shield Green Lantern put around him, looks on in shame at Green Green Lantern. Thanks to your arrogance and stupidity, I have now seen 2 worlds die. I will never forgive you for this, says Martian Manhunter to Jon Stewart. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, don't miss out on our content, be sure to click that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you can keep an eye on when we do more videos like this one. Number 9. See ya! I love this moment. Oh boy, what a wild one. Spider-Man definitely puts the X-Men in their place here. Although this is not intended to be a well-earned kind of take that moment, it definitely ends up as one. Really, this fight comes out of a miscommunication though. Had Spider-Man fully understood what and why the X-Men were thinking of leaving, he may have not behaved quite as rashly here. Although, then again, this is like earlier on in Spider-Man's life, so maybe he would've. The X-Men in Secret Wars were thinking of leaving where they were stationed near the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, because they felt they were not fully understood and accepted, being mutants. When Spider-Man was exploring and he stumbled upon them and overheard this plan. Professor X called out, sensing Spider-Man's presence, and was instantly slapped aside. While all the heroes call for Spider-Man to wait and listen before reporting their thoughts to the Avengers, he makes quick work of just about all of them, including Colossus, Wolverine, Rogue, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Cyclops, and all at once too. Embarrassing. Number 8. You are never anything more than a sheep in wolf's clothing. Yeah, Stephen Strange Jr. sure had it rough in the Ultimate Comics universe of Earth 1610. In his fight against Dormammu, he is handily put in his place as being the last and least of his line, which is pretty intense and honestly should be an ultimately unfair label, considering that while his father was absent for a good part of his life, his mother Clea, who is also an extremely gifted magic user and actually hails from the dark dimension, raised him. So you'd think he would know better how to handle Dormammu, but apparently not. After Dormammu calls him out for being the least of his line, he uses Strange Jr.'s own clothing to defeat him, wrapping him up so tightly that his head basically pops. Number 7. I was busy remembering to put on all my clothes. Oh boy! The feud between Kitty Pryde, aka Kate Pryde as she is now known, and Emma Frost is a long and involved one, and it reared its head once more in Astonishing X-Men issue number 1 from 2004. Kitty is asked to join the mutant school as a staff member and ends up being late on her first day. When Emma calls her out for this on stage and for making a dramatic entrance in front of the whole student body, Kitty responds by calling Emma out, saying, "I'm sorry, I was busy remembering to put on all my clothes." Emma's, always kind of sexily dressed, so I understand why Kitty would say this, but also, I mean, it's Emma Frost, that's how she do. I love how these two women constantly call each other out though, but then now they're like kind of BFFs. Pretty fun journey for them. Number 6. Aren't you wanted by the police? This is an Outlaws Anonymous. Ouch. This one hurts to go back and read. This comes to us from the first issue of Spider-Man. Well, just starting out here, there are a bunch of moments where both the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man are put in their place during their interaction with one another. First of all, Spider-Man, wanting to join the FF, sneaks into the Baxter building successfully and manages to prove his prowess by defeating the Fantastic Four single-handedly. Meanwhile, they put Spidey in his place when they find out he came looking for a job. One, they insult him for even trying to audition for their team in such an aggressive manner, while also being a wanted potential criminal, someone they would rather never associate with, at least not at this time. 2, they also let him know that they are a non-profit, so they don't actually make money, ridiculing him for even thinking that working for them would be considered a 9-to-5 style job in terms of the pay. Just a big ouch all around. Number 5. I actually think I just became dumber. After battling Korvac, Iron Man becomes the Iron God, and decides to use his newfound power to make the world better. With his newfound power cosmic putting him at God tier, Tony decides to start working his magic first over on Earth. He heads there and decides to grant a gift to all its human inhabitants, making all of them Stark-level geniuses. Most people are shocked by this, but when the Invisible Woman states that she doesn't feel any different and asks her husband, Reed Richards, if he does, he responds with, I actually think I just became dumber. Number 4. I will not go into battle beside someone I do not trust. Tower of Babel is a JLA story where Batman ends up being exposed as an untrustworthy member in the sense that he has plans for how all of his teammates could easily be taken out, keeping records and downright foolproof plans of what to do should they turn to the dark side. This secret is exposed when Ra's al Ghul gets his hands on said plans and uses them. Not only that, but he also almost almost finds a way to completely derail Batman himself, exploiting his weakness, the loss of his parents, so that he can do nothing to stop him. In the end, the League are able to rise up and beat Ra's, but they are left with the decision of what to do with Batman. Ultimately, they decide to put him in his place by kicking him off the team. Number 3, and this is what I can do. This one will make you cry, so be warned. In issue number 76 of Superman/Batman, Dick Grayson has taken up his father, Bruce Wayne's, role as Batman after his apparent death fighting against Darkseid. Now, of course, we'd later learn that Batman didn't actually die, but at the time everyone thought he was dead. After losing his own father, Superman, aka Clark Kent, confronts Dick and tells him he has to take the Batsuit off and give it up. Let Batman go. However, Dick pushes back, telling Clark that he knows he's hurting and he knows that they both miss their fathers, but that being Batman is something that he simply has to do. I know you lost your father and you're angry. You can do anything in the world. Can't bring them back. I lost my father too, and this is what I can do. Ugh. Number 2. Which stage of grieving is this? 2004's Astonishing X-Men issue number 1 is full of moments where the X-Men get in each other's faces, including maybe the greatest one, which actually stands out as one of the biggest feud moments ever in all of X-Men history besides, when Wolverine calls out Cyclops for being with Emma Frost so soon after Jean Grey's death. One of her deaths. Anyways, Wolverine, who is also a member of the staff at the school but was absent from the first day of orientation, makes his first appearance perched on the end of Emma and Scott's bed the morning after. He wakes them up by asking, "So tell me, which stage of grieving is this? Denial?" Which of course prompts Psyche to optic blast him out the window. Talk about a start to the school year. Also, I love how the staff have like more drama than the students. Number 1. I have nothing to say. Wolverine has been having it rough these days. Despite Krakoa being a virtual mutant paradise, he doesn't seem to be getting much of a vacation lately. During Lives and Deaths of Wolverine, he was forced to travel through time in an effort to protect mutant kind by safeguarding the life of Charles Xavier, their leader. And following that, he ended up being mind controlled by Beast, the head of X-Force, who deemed this action necessary for getting the dirtiest of jobs done, since Wolverine without mind control was of course less inclined to obey his orders, and actually I believe even wanted to leave the team. Beast saw this as a necessary evil to protect Krakoa, but once Wolverine was free, he decided it was time to put Beast in his place for all his evil deeds, for once and for all. And honestly, if any hero deserves it lately, it is Hank. He's been traveling farther and farther down a dark path since even before the days of Krakoa. Finally, his treachery came to an end, at least it did for now, after Wolverine took his life in issue number 30 of his own series, with Beast's last words being, "I have nothing to say."
And at 10, The Flash. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but his story is really humiliating when you think about it. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robins, but they kept dying left, right, and center, obviously, but mostly because of voter call-ins. So understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his methods, and he just basically started killing every one of his villains, which honestly seems more realistic to me. Like maybe instead you quit fighting crime, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. This eventually leads him to Barry Allen, who refuses to give Bruce's Speed Force powers for understandable reasons. So Batman then uses his various rogues weapons to fight Barry and knocks him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill powered Batmobile and drives them both into the Speed Force. When entering the Speed Force, Barry and Bruce end up fusing together into one being, and they turn into a evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing, while Barry's mind is trapped inside of Bruce's body. Now, some of you may not consider this humiliating, but I think it counts, because like I'd classify that as pretty embarrassing, getting locked inside someone else's body when they're using your superpowers. So yeah, I'll at least put it at number 10. And at 9, Lord Death. Lord Death was a secondary villain that has not appeared too many times in the comic books. He also has a rather peculiar ability. He can't actually die. Whenever he's on the verge of death, Lord Death will actually enter a trance-like state and resurrect himself. How does one stop an enemy that can always come back no matter how many times you kill him, you ask? Well, the answer, for Batman at least, was a rocket. But seemingly not a bat rocket, which is hella unfortunate. Batman straps Lord Death to a rocket and then sends him up into space. Yeah, where the guy ends up spending all of eternity floating in the cold vacuum of ever-expanding space. Beating someone who is named Lord Death that can resurrect himself is kind of already like kind of a flex, but when you're just a mere mortal man, and then you do it, it seems like it would be pretty humiliating if you ask me. It would have been more humiliating though if it was Batman using the Bat Rocket to send him into bat space for the rest of Baternity. I apologize for all the bat puns. I know it was a bit of a stretch, but I have to get my daily pun quota out there somehow. And at 8, Green Lantern Corps. In Dark Knight's Metal, we see a very dark version of Batman from an alternate universe within the Dark Multiverse. In that universe, Batman was given a Green Lantern ring. Batman has indomitable willpower, so he was deemed worthy by the ring, which is actually pretty understandable. The power ring came with some protocols though that ensured that no Green Lantern could ever misuse the most powerful weapon in the universe. Batman not only broke those protocols with his will, but he also outsmarted the entire Green Lantern Corps that had come to stop this rogue lantern. So I think it's safe to say this is pretty damn humiliating for the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps, because Batman defeated every lantern that came to stop him. But he had enough willpower to actually break the willpower of the ring, and then he was able to use it for nefarious means. Like, that feels like it would be like the ultimate kick in the gonads. And at least like if lanterns themselves had gonads. Can like the collective consciousness of the Green Lantern Corps just like manifest like a giant sack for Batman to kick? Because at this point that's what he did. And it's 7, Crazy Quilt. After his eyes were injured in a robbery, Crazy Quilt underwent an experimental procedure which resulted in him seeing nothing but blindingly bright color. This of course somehow turned him into an insane criminal. How insane? Well, first of all, he tried to steal color itself, which no one ever figured out how he planned to do. And second of all, his powers were basically constantly having a illicit substance trip, that is an acronym, that is like LED, which affects literally no one but himself. Even when Crazy Quilt got a helmet that allowed him to project his like crazy eye color lights at people, all Batman and Robin needed to do was like turn a mirror on him and reflect a beam back, and he was done. In all honesty, I don't even think Batman needed to do much here to actually embarrass him. I mean, like, the dude calls himself Crazy Quilt. I think that says enough. Like, I don't know a single person who is scared of quilts. Like, what do you think this name is gonna do? And even if he didn't name himself, I feel like that just adds an extra layer to it, you know? Like, why do you think that they called you Crazy Quilt? Because you want to steal color? No, it's because you're crazy and don't scare anyone. And at 6, the Gotham Mob. Batman's "You have eaten well" speech from year 1 may just be the most iconic moment in Batman history. It's the definitive Batman moment in the definitive Batman origin, as the Dark Knight formally announces his presence to the Gotham underworld with an entrance that the Kool-Aid Man would have been very proud of. After blowing up the dining room wall of a Gotham mansion where Carmine Falcone was hosting a get-together with the big criminals of the city, including GCPD Commissioner Loeb, the Dark Knight proceeds to deliver an all-timer of a monologue, vowing that from this moment on, none of you are safe, before extinguishing the last light in the room and leaving in hushed silence. Prior to this sequence, every single mobster and crook in that room thought themselves to be untouchable, but in one fell swoop, Batman eliminates any sense of security that they may have had and brings them crashing back down to Earth. It's one of the most iconic Batman moments of all time, incredibly intimidating, and considering how the whole mob was just bested by one man, pretty embarrassing. Halfway through into number 5, Condiment King. I think this is pretty obvious. I mean, like, Condiment King was meant to be an embarrassing villain. But the first meeting between him and Batman in Batman the Animated Series is absolutely amazing. The Condiment King first appeared in the episode Make 'Em Laugh, voiced by Stuart Pankin. He was whimsical and made many condiment-based puns. For example, the big bad bat guy, I knew you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I relished this meeting. You, the dynamic Dark Knight versus me, the conceptual Condiment King. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. However, Batman wasn't down for games, since as Condiment King said cut the mustard, Batman just punches him in the gut, much to Condiment King's surprise. He falls down and was like, "You punched me!" Like, yeah, of course he did. And then Batman proceeds to tell him point blank, "Look, Mustard Man," or whatever you call yourself, "obviously you're new at this, so I'll go easy on you as long as you give back the loot and promise never to try this again." To which the Sultan of Sauces, he slips on ketchup and falls off the balcony he was standing on, grabbing onto a neon sign to save his life. So yeah, definitely deserving of this list. In at 4, the Riddler. Last time I talked about a specific instance in which Batman taunts Nigma in front of Green Arrow, but Batman literally solving any riddle that Nigma sends his way is pretty much always humiliating. Like every single time, Nigma thinks that he's come up with like the most genius thing, or that Batman will never solve it, or at least he thinks it will be a tough time solving it, and then Batman solves it and Nigma is just left defeated. Like I know it's not like in the typical sense embarrassing, but I feel like at this point like the Riddler should have just like given up, okay? He's been beaten so many times. He's the condiment king of the recognizable and popular rogues. He doesn't really do much, but he's there to kind of like toy with you until like, you know, the world's greatest detective actually uses his brain. You see, if the Riddler had revealed the whole 3 Joker thing instead of the Mobius chair with a riddle, okay, that would have been something. But instead, he's like a walking fudgesicle stick. He doesn't really need Batman to embarrass him, he does it on his own. Although I haven't seen the Batman yet, so maybe he's better in that movie. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Dr. Death. Dr. Death, aka Dr. Carl Helfern, is historically the first supervillain encountered by Batman. In his first appearance in Detective Comics number 29, Dr. Death develops a lethal chemical agent from pollen extract and enacts a plan to use the poison to extort money from wealthy Gotham City citizens. In an attempt to evade capture by Batman, Dr. Death ignites chemicals in his laboratory, presumably killing Jabba, his partner, and himself in the resulting explosion. He comes back in the next issue with the same plan, but Batman intervenes in the plot and upon apprehending the Doctor, discovers that Dr. Death's face is horribly disfigured from the lab explosion, resulting in his whole body having a brown skeletal appearance. But that doesn't stop Batman from basically dismembering this guy in Batman number 29 from 2011, where he just absolutely kicks the out of this hideous creature, saying, "Let me help you with that, this is when I hurt you," and then proceeds to help snap his bones. So yeah, this is like the second worst thing that happened to Helfern, the first being looking like that. Penultimately, in at number 2, Lex Luthor. Close on the heels of the incident of No Man's Land where Lex Luthor tried to unsuccessfully take over the city of Gotham, the DC villain was so angry at Bruce Wayne for ruining his project that he actually cooked up a plan to put Bruce behind bars. Lex approached David Kane, who was upset at Bruce for another reason, and enlisted him to make sure that Bruce would be the main suspect for the murder of Vesper Fairchild, who the millionaire had been seeing for a while. It's actually a plan that works too, for Bruce is eventually arrested for a crime that he didn't commit. It takes Bruce nearly a year to clear his name, but once he does, he gets Lex back in one of the most incredible ways that someone has beat Lex. Batman shows up, beats Luthor down, and then tells him, quote, "You are penniless, Luthor. As of this morning, Bruce Wayne owns this property, and he wants you out of the building." Considering how Luthor's whole identity is wrapped around trying to beat heroes using his tech, losing that tech to Bruce Wayne buying out his building definitely would put a bad taste in his mouth. And finally, in at number 1, Bane. Of all the characters that have broken Batman, Bane is arguably the one who did it the most successfully, because he actually broke him. Everyone loves to talk about the back-breaking beatdown delivered during Nightfall, but the build-up to that saw the masked mercenary preside over the Dark Knight's complete psychological breakdown as well, as he was forced to negotiate a mass breakout of Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Penitentiary. The two would have had their brushes in the following years, but their feud was taken to a whole other level during Tom King's run of Batman in 2016. In that series, Bane had to become dependent on the Psycho Pirate in order to kick his addiction to Venom. Batman also needs the Psycho Pirate though, in order to help Gotham Girl, so he assembles a team along with Catwoman to go to Santa Prisca to abduct him. Bane and Batman fight once again, which actually ends up leading to Bruce suffering another spine-related injury, only for the Dark Knight to deceive Bane by faking a Catwoman double cross, which allows the feline fatale to then break Bane's back and complete their plan. So yeah, Bane got his back broken. I mean, Batman didn't do the one that wasn't the one who did the kicking in this instance, but still, he helped. Okay, that's good enough for me. And at 10, Superman. The Dark Multiverse is a mysterious dimension. It lies outside of the normal universe. In one of the many universes in the Dark Dimension, Superman went rogue and killed off every hero and villain. No one could actually stop him. The last remaining hero was of course Batman, who could not even believe that his best friend could have done all this. But Batman had a plan. Fail-safe. Surprise. He had studied Doomsday's body and created a virus that could turn himself into a version version. Batman then became Doomsday, killed Superman, and then decided to spread this virus all over the earth, turning everyone into a form of Doomsday, which not only humiliates Superman but also kind of embarrassed Batman himself. I mean, like, he probably went nuts because of the whole like he was part Doomsday thing, but still. In a 9 Calabac, Batman had gone toe-to-toe with the New Gods on 2 occasions prior to the New 52, in Comic Odyssey and Final Crisis respectively, but this time he came with a vengeance. In the wake of Damian Wayne's death in the finale of Batman Inc., Bruce happens upon Ra's al Ghul's attempt to resurrect his son in a Lazarus pit, along with his former lover Talia. He prevents the head of the demon from bringing them back to life, as they would emerge as Raz's servants. But before they can actually stop Damian's body from being resurrected, his body gets snatched, and his dead son is ripped from Batman's grasp. And then this guy heads back to Apokolips. This leads Batman to deploy the Hellbat armor and venture all the way to Apokolips to retrieve his son, and in the process ends up fighting Darkseid and Calabac, the Lord of Apocalypse's faithful son. In at 8 White Martians, Grant Morrison's Justice League run features the world falling under attack from the villainous White Martians, and it's up to the Justice League, obviously, to stop them. Also, like in the cartoons version of this story, the decisive blow is finally dealt by Batman, who is so badly underestimated by the White Martians because he lacks the superpowers of his fellow teammates. The White Martians managed to capture all of the Justice League and assumed that Batman was killed when they shot down the Batwing. However, the Dark Knight had survived the wreckage because of his plot armor and deduced that they were just as susceptible to fire as Martian Manhunter, due to the fact that they didn't come near his burning plane. Batman swoops in, sets everything on fire like a pointy-eared Human Torch, and saves his teammates. Another lesson in why you should never underestimate him, which reminds me of when Oliver Queen shot all the Dominators with their own gun in the Invasion crossover on the CW after escaping Dreamworld, which is still one of my favorite Arrow episodes. And in 7th Cersei, Amazon's Attack was a short crossover that released in the build-up to Final Crisis. The comic saw Cersei manipulate the Amazons into invading the United States, believing that Wonder Woman had been detained by the Department of Metahuman Affairs, which wouldn't really make sense given that she's an Amazon and not a metahuman, but anyway. The Justice League was sent in response, or chose to go on their own at least, and wouldn't you guess it, Batman is right in the front lines. The Amazon Attacks crossover sees the Sorceress underestimate Batman and suffer embarrassment as a result. Batman enlists the help of Zatanna to defeat Cersei, and the League's preeminent magician casts a spell on the Wonder Woman adversary that renders her powerless for a short period of time, allowing for the Dark Knight to get the drop on her and lay the groundwork for Wonder Woman to swoop in and deliver the final blow. And at 6, Deathstroke. When it comes to comics, Batman and Deathstroke have faced off with each other on many occasions, with no definitive results going one way or the other. One of the most recent battles in the aptly titled Batman vs. Deathstroke comic saw the two fight into a stalemate. It's a fitting conclusion with a duel between the world's greatest detective and the world's deadliest assassin. Bats and Deathstroke then fought each other on top of a cable car dangling over Gotham Harbor. And just as when it seems as though Slade has gotten the upper hand, the Cape Crusader is able to ensnare him with his grapple gun and save the hostage position nearby, at least in the short-lived Beware the Batman animated series, which was released for 1 season in 2013. Deathstroke may be one of the deadliest figures in the DC universe, but that didn't stop Batman from giving this Terminator reject his just desserts. Halfway through into number 5, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was at first not really taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element of being underestimated as his greatest superpower basically. Batman doesn't kill, but he was forced to kill when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that could kill a new god is radion, so Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and caused himself to die in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could actually stop him. He thought if anybody was going to kill him, it would be Clark Kent, so yeah. Up until this point, the only human or sentient being, for that matter, that has truly made Darkseid, the god of evil in the DC universe, cower and run away is Batman. In at 4, Reverse Flash. A pride point for basically all speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so that Barry Allen could access enough Speed Force to save the world and bring his son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne actually started vibrating as fast as he could to slow the destruction of his brain. This actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, or to try and find a way to do so, and gave him the ability to hold quite the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas Wayne gave to Barry to give to Bruce, the only contact that Bruce has had with his parents since they died. The only contact with a living version, which is absolutely brutal. Batman was like ugly crying, and ooh, it was not pretty. Getting close to the end into number 3, the Riddler. Batman Universe is an absolute gem of a comic. The series spotlights Batman in a time-traveling, universe-spanning adventure that takes him all the way from present-day Gotham to Thanagar, then back in time to the Wild West, where he meets Jonah Hex, and then all the way back to the present again. This series starts off somewhat innocuously, however. It's kind of simple, with a confrontation with the Riddler. Only Batman can tell that something isn't quite right. The Riddler's riddle this time was simply, when is the Riddler not the Riddler? And both the Dark Knight and Alfred agree that this is way below Nigma's usual standard. After chasing Riddler down and asking why he's stolen a priceless Fabergé egg, Batman also expresses concern at Nigma's behavior. It comes off as sincere concern, but there's an element of condescension in there as well, about how Riddler just isn't riddling like he used to, and honestly, he's trash at the moment, basically. And it's even more obvious that this is kind of Batman's tone when Green Arrow shows up and Batman literally says, "You're embarrassing yourself in front of Green Arrow. Are you feeling alright?" Which is kind of a dig at both Nigma and Oliver. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit part of Batman's Fenrir contingency, designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League, making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame. When the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League as the beginning of his Endgame plot, Batman was forced to use the Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Batman until Bruce used kryptonite chewing gum and spit it in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on! Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit on your face. Like, seriously, bro, please brush your tongue when you brush your teeth. Your breath is absolutely lethal. Not to mention the miniaturized red suns for Knuckles, ancient Greek supernatural weaponry, super fast servers, and electromagnetic nerve trees for a sensor array that are also in the suit. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origin and the full extent of her abusive relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end with her being thrown out of a window by Mr. J, she decides that the only way to win her Puddin's affection is to capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, well, at capturing. But Joker isn't happy about that. If anyone's gonna take Batman down, it's going to be him. And he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. Batman and Joker then fight, obviously, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever has to actually killing him, and concluding this joke by calling him Puddin', which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done. Being usually a brooding and dark hero who still refuses to kill despite his darkness, calling his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name is one of the best moments for Batman ever.
At number 10, it is the time when Iron Man almost kills a non-Cyttorak powered Juggernaut. In this exchange, Juggernaut is on a tear, and Thor, Ghost, Luke Cage, and Iron Man appear to try and put a stop to him. Iron Man warns Juggernaut with total confidence to stand down cause the numbers are against him. Juggernaut then basically hits L2 and activates his taunt saying, "Then it's almost even." Should not have said that. So instead of humoring any more of this back and forth, Iron Man promptly follows through with his threat and blasts Juggernaut, almost killing him. The blast he hits him with is a sonic beam that he's used before to put down a whole regiment. The attack injures Juggernaut so badly that he's basically like steaming and bleeding from every orifice on his face. It's so bad that Luke Cage has to stop Iron Man before he kills the Juggernaut there and then. And it's pretty clear that Juggernaut had no idea that Iron Man would dominate the battle this much. And it becomes one of the many moments where Iron Man is able to come through and show everyone that he's not only one of the most powerful in the room, but that he's also willing to follow through. Okay, at number 9, we have the time when Iron Man is called to free hostages from an enclosure made of adamantium and vibranium two of the strongest materials in the known universe. Remember, adamantium is the metal that reinforces Wolverine's skeleton and what his claws are made of, and vibranium is what Black Panther's weapons are made of, which can absorb and amplify sonic energy. So when Cardiac traps his hostages in a massive enclosure made of these materials, he clearly doesn't believe that there's any chance anyone could thwart his plans. But when Iron Man arrives on scene, he promptly backs himself up and basically turns his body into a human missile, rocketing towards the enclosure and busting a huge hole in it with his fist. This allows oxygen to enter the chamber, giving the team much more time to eventually save the hostages entirely. He does break his arm and a few ribs, but once again, he takes a villain's confidence and absolutely shatters it with his supreme power and iron will. At number 8, we have an event that is counted widely as one of Iron Man's most powerful feats. Mandarin and Iron Man find themselves facing off against a common enemy, an army of dragons led by Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su. And the dragons seem to be winning. After some pretty close calls, Iron Man and Mandarin seem to be at a stalemate, realizing that the dragons are just not letting up. At this very moment, Chen Su morphs back into dragon form and makes a final appeal to Mandarin for the rings, citing their power and how he is ill-equipped to control them himself. Iron Man realizes that this may be true, but that he is much more than a man, so he could himself unleash the true power of the rings, and he does. He grabs Mandarin's hands and unleashes an enormous explosion that levels a few mountain ranges as well as Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su in one go. This is another moment where a major enemy underestimates Iron Man's superhuman abilities and pays the price for it. At number 7, we have the time when Iron Man escapes the black hole created when Godkiller self-destructs. What's embarrassing about this event is that Godkiller's intentions are to take Iron Man with it in the blast created by its own self-destruction, and it's very sure that it'll accomplish this task considering Iron Man is aboard it. Godkiller is basically a giant suit of armor and Iron Man is in it. That's strangely hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. And I don't blame Godkiller for having high expectations for this final feat, considering the black hole it ends up creating is the size of Earth, meaning that it would have 24 times the mass of the sun. So that means that the only thing Godkiller miscalculates, much like everyone else on this list, is Iron Man's strength, speed, and durability. And yeah, Iron Man comes flying out of the black hole, escaping the close call with his life completely intact. And that means that Godkiller obliterates himself basically for nothing, allowing Iron Man to escape to safety, despite the pull of 24 suns on his back. Godkiller gets absolutely owned here, but at least he's not alone. He's got the other 9 villains on this list to talk it out with. At number 6 is the time when Iron Man unhinges a plan set by the Raxon Corporation when they detonate a deposit of vibranium to try and destroy a fleet of battleships. Basically, going back, it starts with a battle between Iron Man and Namor, which is interrupted by the realization that Raxon is trying to gain control of a whole island due to a deposit of the highly valuable metal vibranium mentioned earlier. When a group of battleships close in to prevent this from taking place, the corrupt corporation decides to detonate the vibranium so that no one can have it. And it seems to be part of the plan to destroy these battleships in the process. But what does Iron Man do? He decides he wants to control the narrative and physically tows the 5 battleships away from the explosion. This makes it so Raxon just destroys the vibranium for no reason. And Iron Man does this with one of his old armors too. He can't help but show everyone that he has the strength to change everyone's plan at any given time and leave them in the dust wondering what happened. At number 5, we've got the time Iron Man shields up right as the Hulk is about to hit him with a huge missile. It seems that at this point in the storyline, the Hulk feels that he's been betrayed by Iron Man, so he's very angry, as usual, and decides to abandon reason and use force instead, as usual. What's brutal about this event isn't just that the Hulk is basically one-shotted by the explosion, but also that Iron Man first rubs it in by schooling the Hulk on the make and design of the missile. He identifies it as his own technology and notices leakage that threatens an explosion that would send them both to Mars and back. So he activates a super powerful shield which protects him from the blast. And those visuals are just ridiculous, seeing the Hulk getting vaporized by the explosion as Iron Man's safe and sound in his little bubble. Not what the Hulk was expecting. Maybe it's time for that dude to start thinking before he acts. especially when he's in the presence of one of the best. Okay, at number 4 is the time when Iron Man fractures the Phoenix Force with his Phoenix Buster armor. Now, I'm not sure if the Phoenix Force can physically feel anything, let alone embarrassment, considering it's a cosmic entity powerful enough to shatter whole worlds like glass, but if it could, its face would be red and hot after Iron Man absolutely wrecks Phoenix Force, forcing it to split up into 5 pieces. And the Phoenix Force isn't the only one who should be feeling the burn from this huge win by Iron Man. Thor even fails to take down Phoenix Force with his hammer right before Tony succeeds at it. So Iron Man is just showing everyone up in this event. And this is a huge event that had been building up for a while. Phoenix Force had been posing a huge threat to the X-Men and the Avengers in this storyline, so Iron Man just showing up and blowing it up into a bunch of pieces is pretty humiliating for such a powerful being. I just like to picture Phoenix Force getting all geared up about taking out all these superheroes and then their plans having to change entirely after a little human in his own little armor appears to stop them in their tracks. It's just, yikes, wrecked. Which brings us to number 3, when Iron Man totally humiliates this fleet of guys wearing power suits that they think could combat his own. With their suits having the same firepower as some small countries, they expect there's no way Tony Stark could match up against them. In fact, Tony is even wearing his classic armor, which isn't quite as powerful as his updated suit, so they even have a better chance than usual to even the score. And still, they're made to look like fools as Iron Man easily evades their heat-seeking missiles and diverts them to actually backfire and destroy the armored assailants themselves. It's just an absolute joke watching him face off against these guys, carrying them around like they're action figures and throwing insults at them, and they seem so confident. That's what kills me about this list, is how confident all these villains are before Iron Man shows them who's boss. It just makes the wins all more embarrassing when they come. Okay, nearing the top of our list at number 2, we have the iconic face-off between Iron Man and Captain America. During the Civil War conflict, the Avengers are split into 2 different factions, one side being led by Captain America, the other by Iron Man. And as tensions escalate on either side, it finally culminates to a big battle between the 2 sides, and of course between Iron Man and Captain America themselves. But like everyone else on this list, Captain America somehow underestimates Tony Stark when he tries to pull a fast one on him and disable his armor. After what seems like a conciliatory handshake between Iron Man and Captain America, Tony notices a small electron scrambler device on his hand, leaving him open to a blow by Cap's shield right to the face. But as Iron Man is laying on the ground, petrified, he simply reboots his armor and gets back up. I don't think Captain America expects this either, because Iron Man flies at him and after an effortless fist fight, knocks him to the ground, almost severing his jaw with one massive punch in the face. This is high up on the list because Captain America is a very skilled strategist, and watching him get shown up so hard like this has to be pretty humiliating, especially in front of all his peers like that. Oof. At number 1, it is the face-off that Iron Man has against Magneto during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. This event takes the top of the list because of the irony. Get it? Iron-y? The irony of this particular face-off, given that Magneto manipulates metal and Iron Man is made of it. Fans had been anticipating this face-off for some time, so when it came, everyone expected Magneto to take the W. And that includes Magneto himself. But in classic ingenious Iron Man fashion, Tony Stark shows up to the fight with a special non-metal armor made out of nanotubes, stealing this huge advantage from Magneto. But that's not where it ends. Iron Man then harnesses the power of Jupiter's magnetic field to power up his armor and take down the magnetic supervillain. And while Magneto is coming back for one final attempt, he's distracted by Phoenix Force, giving Iron Man the chance to knock him out properly this time. This is a huge embarrassment for Magneto since he's the obvious choice for this battle. It might take some time to recover from that one, and I'm not just talking about his physical wounds.
Number 10, first appearance, first defeat. During his very first appearance, Vulture ended up being defeated. He first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 2 and ended that first story he appeared in during the first half of the comic, of course, in prison. Vulture here manages to catch Spider-Man unawares the first time they meet and even kinda captures him. However, Spider-Man escapes and later outsmarts Vulture, realizing that he relies on his wing gadgetry to soar and really has no powers of his own and is just kind of an old guy. Spider-Man creates a device which disables Vulture's wings. Next time the two encounter one another, he uses it during the fight and handily defeats Vulture just like that, clipping the old man's wings and leaving that bird to be caged. Sorry, Adrian. Number 9. Spotter needed. When it comes to Miles Morales' first trip out as Spider-Man, it was embarrassing for both Miles and the first villain he encountered on patrol, Kangaroo. Miles was wearing a Spider-Man costume after Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, had died, and a lot of onlookers felt that this costume was in bad taste because of this. Miles also struggled somewhat with this instigation. He was just kind of getting the hang of his powers. But he got the final punch in his fight against Kangaroo, who had hoisted a car over his head and was about to throw it at Miles. Miles' punch to Kangaroo's chest causes him to drop the car on his own head, making him kind of knock himself out. How embarrassing. Don't worry, Miles does kick him away to safety, so at least he doesn't get crushed by that car. You should always be careful when lifting heavy objects. Case in point. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love when villains get embarrassed, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Inferior Superior. One of the most embarrassing defeats for Otto Octavius around has to be when Spider-Man's heroism and Otto's kinda lack thereof made him realize that despite being called Superior Spider-Man, Otto, who was in Peter Parker's body at the time, was not actually capable of saving the day here. He needed Peter's help. This caused Otto to relinquish the body he stole back to Peter Parker, who still had a remaining consciousness left within it. Surrendering, Otto would later show back up in a clone of Peter's body, but would eventually go back to being the regular old Doc Ock in the end. Stick to what you're best at, maybe, is the moral here. Although I won't lie, I did enjoy watching Superior Spider-Man thwip around the city, beating baddies in Spider-Man's place. There were some things he was pretty good at, but this just wasn't one of them. It was a neat time in the comics. Number 7. Rejected. We've seen this tactic used a few times to beat Venom. Initially, Spider-Man was the one whom the Venom symbiote wanted the most. Spider-Man was initially depicted as the first host and has been the symbiote's first host in a few different versions of the tale. Although in the comics, Venom now has like a whole back history like before Spider-Man, so yeah. That is a thing that happened. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, the fact that Peter is the first host remains to be the true narrative, as well as in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, or the Raimiverse as well actually. In the Spectacular Spider-Man animated show, it's this connection to Spider-Man that Peter uses in order to defeat the symbiote. He creates a rift between Eddie and the Venom symbiote by offering himself to be the symbiote's host, suggesting that the Venom symbiote, never really wanted to be with Eddie and that he was basically kinda like a rebound for them. When the Venom symbiote decides to leave Eddie, this is seemingly confirmed, hurting their relationship. After bonding to Peter, they also learn that Peter was lying and didn't actually want to be with them. And while trying to make Peter be their one and only, he ends up being protected by the memories and mental manifestations of those he loves within his consciousness. You can't make someone love you. Sorry, Venom. You can try, but it's not gonna work. Number 6. Surprise Spider-Man. Surprise! It's Spider-Man! In Superior Spider-Man issue number 31, we get to see Spider-Man embarrass Green Goblin when his return surprises him. You see, Norman thinks that Spider-Man is actually Superior Spider-Man, aka Otto Octavius, but Spider-Man reveals that it's not Otto driving this time around, and that Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man once more. And of course, you know what that means. Green Goblin is going down, and Spider-Man is going to make fun of his man purse while he does it. Of course, Peter himself is also surprised to find Norman has changed his face, but this doesn't prevent him from kicking Green Goblin's butt, helping to free Otto's love, Anna Maria, and save the day. Number 5. A not so shocking defeat. Of course, Shocker is generally considered to be a B or even C list Spider-Man villain, and as a result he gets made fun of a lot in the comics normally. But it's somehow even more embarrassing in the Ultimate Universe. In issue number 8 of Ultimate Spider-Man, the issue opens with Spider-Man taking on Shocker and making embarrassingly quick work of him, asking who exactly he's supposed to be, the vibrator? Because yeah, the shock he's emitting is pretty weak. The other hilarious point here is that Spider-Man then turns the shock back on the Shocker, jamming his guns and basically causing him to shock himself. Ouch. Number 4. Watch your step. This embarrassing defeat comes to us from the pages of issue 230 of the Amazing Spider-Man comic. In this two-part story, Spider-Man took on the unstoppable power of the Juggernaut. While physically Peter struggled, Spider-Man eventually figured out a way to put a stop to Juggernaut without having to try and match his strength. Instead, he jumped on his head and he covered his eyes. because they were fighting in a construction site as Juggernaut flailed around trying to basically get the spider off his head. He accidentally stumbled into some wet cement, sinking down deep and finding himself trapped. So apparently take Juggernaut's eyesight away and he'll basically defeat himself because he's so clumsy. At least that's how it went down this time. Spider-Man of course just leapt to safety after Juggernaut was confirmed as stuck, taking the opportunity to make fun of all of his clumsiness. Poor Juggernaut. Stumblefoot, I think that's what he calls him. You Stumblefoot. Number 3, Back in Black. During the events of the Back in Black storyline, Peter dons his old black costume while trying to hunt down the person responsible for shooting Aunt May. He ends up discovering that Kingpin was behind the hit. In truth, it had actually been a hit put on Peter Parker after it was revealed that he was Spider-Man, but Aunt May was shot instead by accident. As Aunt May lay in the hospital fighting for her life, Peter decided to pay Kingpin a visit in prison. Not caring about his identity any longer, he even removed the top half of his suit, wanting Kingpin to know that this is Peter Parker fighting him, not Spider-Man. Peter brutally beats Kingpin up, humiliating him in front of the other inmates. The whole point is to show Kingpin just how strong Peter is and how he could easily kill Fisk, should he want to. He leaves Kingpin just barely alive to live with the humiliation of what happened, but does warn if Aunt May dies, then he'll be back to finish the job. Considering Fisk is all about being the strongest, most powerful guy in the room, this whole fight would be pretty embarrassing for him. Number 2, Hubris. A lot of Spider-Man's villains carry a certain kind of pride around when it comes to taking on Spidey. They often see themselves as better than Spider-Man, which is how they know they are sure to win. They also often see themselves as better than each other as well. And yet, often they don't end up winning. One of the most embarrassing and smartest defeats occurred when one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains had his ego used against him. Yep, we're talking about Norman Osborn. At this point in time, Norman was actually also bonded to the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the villain that we would refer to as Red Goblin. Well, together these two seemed pretty unstoppable. Armed with both the Goblin serum powers and Carnage's power set, Spider-Man managed to defeat Osborn by getting him to ditch the symbiote. Got in his head. And all it took was taunting Norman to do this, implying that a victory while bonded to the Carnage symbiote would be more a victory for the symbiote than Norman himself, and implying that Osborn couldn't beat Spider-Man alone. This prompted Norman to ditch Carnage, which of course resulted in him being defeated by Spider-Man and company. But really, Spider-Man. Number 1, defeated by laughter. And of course this list would not be complete if we did not mention one of the most embarrassing defeats of all time, and just in general, most embarrassing villains. Aw, sorry Peter. Paste Pot Pete. This one went down during the Spider-Man Human Torch team-up series in issue number 1. Here Paste Pot Pete is attempting to get revenge on the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm, when he runs into Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't even fight this poor guy, he just defeats him by embarrassing him. When Peter Petruski reveals his intent and his villainous name of Paste Pot Pete, Spider-Man reacts not by attacking him, but by falling to the ground, laughing at the idea of his ridiculous villain name. Paste Pot Pete ends up just walking away, deciding he should probably change his name. Later on, he would become Trapster, which is a lot better, but still not great in terms of villain names that, you know, aren't ridiculous in some way.
Number 10, Shazam and Injustice. I'm starting off this countdown with a pretty brutal and pretty much upsetting Superman win, but it's nonetheless an incredibly quick and easy win by Superman that shows how he can wildly outmatch members of even the Justice League. In the Injustice games, Superman is the tyrant ruler of the Earth. Most of the other heroes have either joined him or joined Batman as part of an effort to thwart Superman and bring him down. One of the heroes who remained on Superman's side was actually Billy Batson, Shazam. This is kind of surprising to mostly everyone, but seeing that Billy Batson is only a kid, it starts to make a little bit more sense. It also makes it very, 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 very brutal when Superman kills Shazam for turning on Superman and mentioning the dead Lois Lane. Superman kills him extremely quickly, using his frost breath to freeze Shazam's mouth shut, stopping him from using his signature phrase, and then melting his brain through his eyes with his heat vision. It made me immediately hate this version of Superman, but it was also a super embarrassing and sad way for Shazam to go out. Number 9, Out of This World Punch. Whenever Bizarro would show up back in the day, it always felt like he was kind of like that weird cousin that you try to get out of talking to as soon as possible. When Bizarro gets lost and believes the people of his world are destroyed, he returns back to Earth and tries to kidnap Lois Lane to repopulate the Bizarro world. Superman and Batman have visited it in the future though, so it's kind of impossible that it's been destroyed. Superman's right. The Bizarro world is actually perfectly fine. So, to get Bizarro back home, Superman, after incapacitating Bizarro, finds the point where he landed on the Earth and literally just punches him back the direction he came, all the way back to his own planet, and then shows him that his planet is perfectly fine. This one is a tiny bit caring rather than embarrassing, but could you imagine getting a single punch from the guy you came to fight that just sends you across the universe back to your homeworld, when he could have just dragged you there too? Number 8, throwing an ape through time. The stories in the 1950s were crazy. In Superman number 127, we were introduced to Titano the Super Ape. He started off as a smart ape that was sent into space, but then was accidentally exposed to radiation from 2 colliding meteors. This, for some reason, gave Titano the ability to fire rays of green kryptonite out of his eyes. I don't know. Obviously, that is a problem for Superman though, a big one. Luckily, Superman's girlfriend is able to trick Titano into wearing lead sunglasses that stop the kryptonite's rays, at which point, Superman just picked up the giant ape and threw him back through time. Superman chucked this super monkey through time. Like, how do you come back from that? You don't. You just give up. Number 7, roles reversed. There have been a few times where Superman loses his powers. The one I want to talk about though is from All-Star Superman Volume 1, number 12. Clark Kent has lost his powers, and thanks to a serum, Lex Luthor has gained powers. After Lex makes threats against the Daily Planet staff, Clark shoots Lex with a gravity gun. The gravity gun starts quickly draining his powers and gives him super sensory input after he defeats Superman in single combat in front of the media. Once his powers drain away though, Lex goes to attack Superman in a fit of anger. The recently beaten up, depowered Superman is still no pushover though, as he takes out Lex with one single, non-superpowered punch to the face. This was also still in front of all the media he had just declared his dominion of Earth in front of, too. Number 6, chased with the sun. When Jimmy Olsen was on a game show back in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 33 in the Silver Age of comics, there was a special prism that appeared in a dump that for some reason turned the thoughts of the game show contestants into real things. So, when Jimmy answered a question with Jack Frost, that's who appeared. Jack Frost threatened to plunge the world into a new ice age. So what was Superman's solution? Simple. Just go and move the sun closer to the Earth. Not only was this a ridiculous feat, but it was incredibly embarrassing looking for Jack Frost, who basically had to run away from Superman chasing him with the sun. Once Jack Frost had retreated into a deep, dark, cold cave under the Earth, Superman put the sun back where he got it so it didn't destroy the Earth. He did all this as nonchalantly as moving some furniture. Number 5, all shook up. After his infamous death at the hands of Doomsday, and his not exactly surprising return, Superman faces off against the cyborg version of himself, Hank Henshaw, that took over the role of Superman in his place. The cyborg was actually tarnishing the name of Superman. Hank ruined Supes' memorial, and more importantly, he had just blown up Coast City, killing millions. When Superman actually returns from the dead, he doesn't have his powers back just yet. So the conflict actually lasts a little while. But once Superman gets his powers back, you best believe he beats the sucker. In one page, no less, by punching him through the chest and then using his super speed to shake him so fast that he falls apart. Superman shook this guy to death. Number 4, the Super Showdown. In Superman number 153, a group of Kryptonian criminals who were banished to the Phantom Zone come to the small western town of Drywood Gulch. The criminals dress as cowboys to hide their identity until our boy Superman arrives on the scene. The criminals had created Phantom Zone powered pistols that are capable of banishing whoever is shot into the Phantom Zone. And they give one to Superman, challenging him to a duel, since we're in a western town. How on earth though will Superman outdraw 8 super beings? Great Caesar's ghost! He melted all their ray guns moments before they drew. Yes, he cheated, but they challenged Earth's most powerful defender to a gunfight. He ain't got time for that. Number 3, Batman. There have been many times that Superman and Batman are pitted against each other. It's always a fun story, and it's always a big seller. And for some reason, we tend to see Batman with an edge. But in Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, Lex Luthor gives Bruce Wayne a shard of green kryptonite to use against Superman. Historically, this has always been an issue, but in this story, Superman just uses his super breath to blow the shard out of Bruce Wayne's hands. That's all he had to do. After it falls to the ground, Superman drags Batman through the air and drops him. Superman throws a punch at Batman, but just as he's about to turn Batman into a red smear, he stops short of smashing his nose, just to prove a point. Superman can easily destroy Batman if he wants to. Yes, Bruce can win and has multiple times, but with so much more effort than Superman ever would need to put in. And this proves it. Number 2, revenge denied. After discovering the planet of the Superman Revenge Squad, Superman charges at the planet with a full frontal assault, armed with nothing but his abilities and a strange package attached to his chest. The Revenge Squad fires all of their most dangerous, most powerful weapons at Superman, firing everything they think will take out the Man of Steel. They all impact on Kal-El, and his villains think they've won. For a moment. But when the dust settled, they didn't even leave a scratch. Instead, the package on Soup's chest detonated, encircling the whole planet in a layer of mist. Superman then yells down to the villains, explaining if any of them pass through the mist, leaving the planet, they will suffer total amnesia, forgetting any hatred they have for Superman. So, they can remain trapped on their base, being angry and upset, or they can rejoin the cosmos devoid of all grudges. Either way, he doubts he will ever see them again, and then he just flies back home. Cold. Hey y'all, I hope you're enjoying this list so far. We're gonna get on to the number 1, but before we do, I just wanna say thanks for watching. Don't forget to whack that like button like Superman with so many of these villains. It really helps us out here. Okay, on to number 1. Number 1, RSVP. In the Man of Steel story, Lex Luthor and Superman have been rebooted. Lex Luthor is an evil billionaire instead of a mad scientist, and he is also ginger. Clearly evil. Lex is so rich and powerful he believes he owns Metropolis, and by extension, he believes he has a say over the things that Superman does. He's essentially got a humongous ego, which is always the path to an embarrassing downfall. When Luthor plans a terrorist attack on his yacht to test Superman, he sends an invitation to the boy in red and blue. Superman just, doesn't show up. That's it. He doesn't even give Lex the time of day. To make it worse, Lex is arrested and shamed by the mayor. The embarrassment of this is the inciting incident that caused the rivalry between Lex and Superman for this version of the characters.
At number 10, we have the time when the Flash accidentally kills Reverse Flash by breaking his neck. This incident takes place in the Flash number 79 when Reverse Flash seems to be back to mess with Barry Allen's life again. Their beef starts when Reverse Flash kills the love of Barry's life, Iris West, and sends the Flash into a depression, naturally. But when Barry finally moves on and is set to marry Fiona Webb, Reverse Flash shows up again and tries to kill his new fiancée. So what does Barry Allen do? He swoops in and grabs Reverse Flash in a chokehold while he's in motion, thus snapping his neck and killing him right there and then. Which is pretty embarrassing considering Barry basically just uses Reverse Flash's own momentum to kill him. But following this event, the whole city catches wind of what happens and actually turns on Barry for some reason. I do not understand this. Reverse Flash kept showing up to kill his wives. At a certain point, you have to take that guy out for good. They even put him on trial and convict him, causing the Flash to pack up and move to a different reality, which is like the superhero equivalent of moving to a new town, I guess. Number 9 is a fun one. This one is about Kid Flash and the time that he actually throws none other than Superboy Prime for a loop by running around him in a flurry and even landing a few punches on him. What makes this super embarrassing is that Superboy Prime is trying to have a serious revelation about where the Flash has gone and what Kid Flash is doing in his place. There's been some kind of break in the timeline at this point, and Superboy Prime thinks that the Flash has been killed. And as this epic realization moment is supposed to be happening, Kid Flash is ducking and dodging around Superboy's blasts and just being straight up goofy about the whole situation. So not only does the Flash seem to cheat death here, but his youthful replacement is just absolutely toying with this hyper-powerful villain and not even breaking a sweat. This moment serves a helpful purpose as well because the rest of the team is able to focus on their objectives while Superboy Prime is distracted. And on top of everything, Kid Flash ends up having a full-on reunion with his friend, totally ignoring Superboy Prime. This isn't something such a powerful villain is used to, being taken for a fool like this. I just feel like it belongs on the list. At number 8 is a pretty cruel one. In The Flash number 200, Wally West basically forces Zoom to relive the most traumatic day of his life on a loop for eternity. But once again, this is the result of Zoom attacking his wife Linda and effectively ending the life of the baby in her womb. Okay, what's the deal with everyone going after the Flash's wives? Honestly, this is a pretty hardcore punishment for Zoom and might even go further than embarrassment in its effect, but he sort of had it coming. I mean, if Wally wanted to, he could have probably just killed him once he caught him, but instead he decides he's gonna let the guy think about what he's done for the rest of eternity while living out the worst thing he's ever experienced. A villain like Zoom isn't used to facing punishment like this very often, but trying to take things as far as he did does have its consequences, even at the hands of an otherwise kind and forgiving superhero like the Flash. Don't mess with the fam, people, come on. He's the fastest dude in the cosmos. At number 7 is the time when, in the early days of The Flash, he basically gloats over the dead body of a villain he's just driven off the road. Something about the old-timey era of superheroes makes moments like this so much more bizarre because it seems like the writers haven't quite yet gotten the hang of the characters. Like, I don't think this is something The Flash would ever do again after this instance, but it's definitely a humiliating way to treat this enemy. In this scene here, this bad guy named Satan, totally unrelated to the fallen angel, goes flying off a cliff in a car and explodes in the wreckage on the ground below. And of course, the Flash is already there to watch it all go down. He just sort of stands over him with his hands on his hips and says, "I'm on hand just to see your finish, Satan. Thus ends the threat of the Faultless Four." Considering that superheroes are known to have more forgiving moral compasses, this is a pretty dark and humiliating end for this Satan guy. And he didn't even try to hurt the Flash's family or anything. Damn. Okay, at number 6 is the time when the Flash basically drives the Top completely insane. In issue number 215, during the event Identity Crisis, the Flash finally captures the Top and has Zatanna mind wipe him, turning him into a good guy. A once menacing and threatening villain, the Top is reduced to tears by the Flash after he is then forced to relive all his past evil deeds. And the Flash just sort of lets it happen. The Top becomes basically totally destroyed on the inside with guilt, facing his demons all at once as the Flash watches on. And tragically, the Top basically ends things for himself after everything is said and done. But the Flash doesn't seem to feel badly about it at all. He even refers to it as a kind of experiment and something he might try and do again. When I read that, I was like, whoa, Flash, chill out, dude. I think you got him. You definitely defeated the Top. You can just relax now. No need to try that out on anyone else. It's hard to watch, you know? What happened to putting people in jail and stuff? Alright, at number 5 is the time when the Flash kills Gorilla Grodd with a little sticky bomb. This is yet another savage moment for the Flash, or I suppose this is actually Scarlet Speedster, but he's filling in the role for the Flash, so it counts. During the Flash Annual number 3, the Scarlet Speedster is going back in time to correct some past evil deeds. You know, as he does. And on the way through time, he decides to take a quick stop at Grodd's lair. And while they duke it out for a while, the Flash decides that he's gonna take the gorilla out for good this time. So as he gets the better of Grodd, he plants a tiny sticky bomb on the ape and runs out of harm's way to basically watch the monkey go boom boom. As he's standing off to the side, his plan takes effect and the ape gets blown to smithereens right in front of him. What's humiliating about this moment is that Gorilla Grodd is just minding his own business before the Speedster shows up and decides it's the end of the road for him. And as he's trying to disarm the bomb, or at least rip it off his skin, Grodd's fingers are just too big to get a hold of the tiny bomb. It's sort of a sad moment, really. But definitely pretty embarrassing for a villain that otherwise poses a decent threat in the previous storylines. Okay, at number 4, we have the time when Barry Allen, aka The Flash, of course this is a Flash list, breaks a tie on a vote for whether or not to wipe Dr. Light's mind. The rest of the Justice League is torn on the severity of the punishment for Dr. Light's assault of Sue Dibney, but the Flash, once again choosing to be a savage that day, decides he'll allow it to go forth, and turns Dr. Light into a shell of his former self, completely without identity and basically rendered useless. And Dr. Light is normally a super threatening bad guy, so this isn't a position that he's used to being in, you know, totally stripped of everything he's ever known like that, and it's all at the hands of the Flash. This dude can be a real monster sometimes, eh? Even when Batman finds out this happens, he's like, what the hell? And sort of confronts the Flash, who then, get this, mind wipes him too. I think this list is perfect for the Flash because he just seems to like doing business this way every once in a while. Alright, at number 3 we have the time when the Flash turns Inertia into a living statue and then puts him in a museum. This is a pretty brutal punishment once again, and definitely something Inertia is not expecting. I mean, who thinks they're going to be overpowered on this level? After Kid Flash grows up, he takes over the moniker of Scarlet Speedster, filling in the role of the Flash while the mantle is basically unclaimed at the time. But he's eventually killed by Inertia, which is a pretty sad outcome for Kid Flash. And when Wally West returns as the Flash, he hunts down Inertia and confronts him about this incident. But Inertia doesn't seem sorry at all. And this is when Wally West goes beast mode and freezes Inertia as a sentient statue and puts him in the Flash Museum. And remember, Inertia is still alive in there, taking everything in and very aware that they're probably going to be stuck as a statue forever. Visitors will come by and look at Inertia as part of a villain's exhibit, read the little plaque about him, go, oh interesting, look, one point this guy was a pretty powerful villain, look, his Latin name is Inerticus Godondicus. And he'll never be able to wreak havoc ever again. How humiliating. And honestly, sort of fair, all things considered. Okay, at number 2, we have the time that the Flash actually runs himself back to life. This is a feat that absolutely astounds Black Racer, who is basically a conduit of death, chasing the Flash to snuff him out for good. But the Flash runs into an issue, in that he will eventually run out of stamina if he keeps running for his life. So, what he decides to do is run so far into the future that he reaches the end of the universe. And what happens when they reach the end of the universe? Well, Black Racer can't go on any further, of course. And he sure doesn't expect this. Although I don't know why anyone could expect it, because if Black Racer can't go beyond the end of the universe, why can Barry? This question is hotly contested online and basically comes down to the explanation that Barry reaches the end of the universe before Black Racer can, basically causing death to cease to exist. So he doesn't just humiliate Black Racer, he humiliates Death, its creator. Death needed to create Black Racer, so Speedster couldn't outrun Death anymore, and for the Flash to simply thwart that plan by doing something as risky and badass as running to the end of the universe, it's just crazy, and it belongs on the list. Finally, at number 1 is the time when the Flash single-handedly destroys Anti-Monitor's antimatter machine. Although he knows it'll mean his death, the Flash takes on a machine that will otherwise kill everyone he's ever loved, and let Anti-Monitor take his final victory over humanity. So he does what he does best and runs really fast, encircling the machine and breaking apart its outer casing, blowing up some henchmen in the process. This basically renders the machine useless, and Anti-Monitor knows it. He doesn't even hide his panic either, as he screams out that the Flash is behind all this and that his whole plan is foiled. Such a huge enemy like Anti-Monitor getting taken out by one single tiny superhero is a pretty embarrassing situation, and it sort of proves that Anti-Monitor is totally underestimating the Flash and humanity itself. I mean, he even says it himself, 1,000 universes and more have died because of me. Yet those humans have thwarted my plans, and more than once. Ah! Then he flips out. I don't think this is a regular occurrence for such a powerful evil force, and it's all because of the selflessness and bravery of the Flash, letting himself die just to show up the Anti-Monitor one last time. I'm just picturing Anti-Monitor sitting at his desk reworking his plans after this goes down, like, ah man, okay, antimatter machine, no go, tried that, but failed. Man, maybe I've just lost my touch. Maybe I should find a nice universe where I can retire. Maybe I should just relax for a bit. How was that Anti-Monitor impression? Is that how you think he talks?
Coming in at number 10, we've got an honorable mention for the time that the Immortal Hulk buried a similarly immortal villain alive within a mountain, in an incident that was a bit less embarrassing and a bit more existentially terrifying. While on the run, the Hulk found himself running into a mad scientist known as Dr. Fry, who had attempted to conquer death through the use of gamma radiation and had accidentally both poisoned his hometown and turned himself into a glowing skeletal creature that would cannibalize anyone stumbling across his mountain cave. Since he was unable to kill him, the Hulk wound up trapping Dr. Fry within his mountain cave without the use of his arms or legs, essentially burying him alive. Note to self, Do not get on the Hulk's bad side while also being immortal. Coming in at number 9, we've got either the best or worst Hulk pun of all time used against the Red King. Following his exile from planet Earth, the Hulk found himself as a gladiator combatant on the planet Sakaar, battling in fights overseen by the cruel leader of the planet, Angmo Asan, aka the Red King. In a final battle to take back the planet, the Hulk led a force of rebels against their captors, and went head-to-head against the Red King inside his own arena in a sword duel to the death. And while the fight itself was pretty cool, the icing on the cake was the final pun as the Hulk defeated his foe with his sword and cried out, "Hulk slash." Coming in at number 8, we have the Incredible Hulk vs. Black Bolt, King of the Inhumans. Following the Hulk's extended stay on Sakaar, and following the death of the love that he'd found on the planet, the Hulk began making his way back to Earth to face off against the heroes that had sent him into the cosmos in the first place. He was intercepted on the Earth's moon by Black Bolt, who used his incredibly destructive voice to whisper enough at the Hulk when he refused to back down. An attack that likely would have killed anyone else, but left the Hulk still standing, grinning, and saying, "I didn't come here for a whisper, I want to hear you scream," which just might be the most badass thing ever dared to be said to Black Bolt. Coming in at number 7, we have the Ultimate Hulk literally eating Herr Kaiser. As one of the first major enemies faced by the Ultimate superhero team, Kaiser was a Chitauri warrior that had infiltrated Earth during the Second World War and was able to fight toe-to-toe with both Nick Fury and the Super Serum enhanced Captain America. As a last-ditch effort to defeat the villain, the Ultimates unleashed the Hulk to defeat their shape-shifting foe, who decided to ensure Kaiser could never return by eating his corpse and then destroying the feces that resulted from the meal. There's overkill, and then there's being overkilled by the Hulk. Coming in at number 6, we have the Ultimate Hulk vs. Ultimate Abomination. In another example of the Ultimate Hulk being vicious as hell, the Abomination was an attempt to recreate the conditions that had made the Hulk, but hoping to improve the process and allow him to be controlled. The Abomination had all of the Hulk's strength, but retained all of his human brain power after the transformation, which was intended to help the Abomination permanently put down the Hulk, but still led to Abomination being absolutely torn to shreds, with the Hulk adding salt to the wound by claiming, "You think too much," a final backhanded insult to show that being smarter isn't always going to lead to better outcomes. Coming in at number 5, we have the original Marvel Universe's Hulk vs. Abomination, which somehow manages to be even more of a complete victory than the Ultimate versions. After Abomination was blamed for the death of Bruce Banner's wife, Betty Ross, the Hulk went on a complete rampage to destroy Abomination, something the villain intended to finally figure out which of the two green giants was stronger. But in a final humiliating moment, the Hulk had the opportunity to finally kill Abomination, but instead chose to revert back to Bruce Banner, showing his humanity and proving to Abomination that Banner had the strongest willpower of all, the ultimate defeat for Abomination. Coming in at number 4, we have Hulk smashing Loki in the original MCU Avengers film. For years, comic book fans had been yearning to see a proper adaptation of the Jade Giant on screen. And while earlier live-action Hulk films were ambitious in their own ways and had their own unique moments, the most iconic and defining Hulk moment finally came when the Hulk joined the Avengers in their first team-up movie and interrupted Loki's monologuing to give him the beatdown he deserved. This was the Hulk we'd all been waiting to see, and hearing Cap tell him to smash, or the Hulk saying puny god, they were definitely worth the wait. Coming in at number 3, we have the Hulk killing Maestro with the explosion that created him in the first place. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk had become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. A nice nice bit of circular karma that showed that Bruce Banner could outwit even his older self. Coming in at number 2, we have Zombie Hulk versus Zombie Thanos. The Hulk and Thanos might not have gotten to get a proper physical rematch in the MCU, but in the Marvel multiverse, their zombie versions had a fight that has to be seen to be believed. 40 years after the initial infection that turned their universe into an undead wasteland, a zombified Thanos decides to pick a fight with an undead Hulk, claiming that the Hulk has eaten more flesh than his fair share. With the eloquence that only a zombie can provide, the Hulk responded by crushing Thanos' skull between his clapping palms, instantly destroying the weakened Mad Titan and showing that maybe you shouldn't tell the Hulk he's been eating too much lately. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time that the Ultimate Hulk threw the Wolverine's legs up a mountain. While the Wolverine might not count as an outright villain, at this point in the Ultimate Universe, the Hulk and Wolverine were definitely enemies. Tasked by Nick Fury to kill Bruce Banner, the Wolverine got his completely kicked and woke up after their battle to find his lower half entirely missing, ripped off by the Hulk. To make matters worse, his sense of smell let him know that if he wanted to recover his legs and rejoin them to his body with his healing ability, he'd need to climb 4 miles up a mountain. Many people have tried to fight the Hulk over the years, but few people have gotten defeated so embarrassingly as the Wolverine did when his legs got thrown 4 miles away.
Number 10, General Koi and Prince Baran get spooked. Wrapping up the events involving Terra Verde's civil unrest and the face-off with Spore in issue number 23 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine decided upon his return to Madripoor that it was time to give General Koi and Prince Baran a taste of their own medicine. While Prince Baran was a sometimes ally of Wolverine's, for this story he was more playing the role of sometimes villain or antagonist that he's also known for in the series. As such, in the middle of the night, Wolverine pays a visit to both men and kidnaps them. They awaken blindfolded in the sewers, where Wolverine explains the extent of what can happen if the vial of the drug that Koi chose to keep were unleashed on someone, how it would basically make them go insane. It could also potentially unleash a darker evil who was only just defeated, Spore. Really not cool for you to keep that vial, Koi. Koi and Baran fear that Wolverine has administered the drug to them, terrified. They discover, however, that this is not the case, and instead that the only threat in these sewers is an equally deadly and very angry Wolverine. Horrified, they run in fear and escape from the sewers, only to be laughed at by the people of Madripoor as they surface, covered in sewage. Hopefully they learn their lesson. Knowing General Koi though, probably not, because then he does a lot of other stuff. Number 9, unintentionally embarrassed Sabretooth. Sure, Wolverine is all for putting Victor in his place. Once he met the guy and knew how bad he was, that is. But before that, the Creeds were just a family that Wolverine kinda got tied up in. Logan ended up captured and in a circus being used as an attraction. Something about the X-Men and circuses, I tell you, happens a lot. This was really a low point in Wolverine's life as he was suffering from severe depression after the death of Rose, and then following that, the death of his wolf pack by Nathaniel Essex's Bear, which was really upsetting because he'd taken a lot of solace in his pack. In the end, it was Clara Creed who managed to reach out to Logan, saving him both physically and emotionally. The two fell in love with one another quickly, but it didn't end well for either of them. Saul Creed, Clara's little brother, sold them out. Once this was revealed, Logan felt the only way to protect Clara was to get rid of Saul, permanently. Clara was ready to cut Saul out of her life, but didn't want to see him killed. Because Logan killed Saul, she rejected him. And because Logan killed Saul, Victor interpreted it as a slight, embarrassed that Logan had been the one to kill Saul, as Saul was Victor's to torment. Victor would visit Saul each year on his birthday to beat him up. So yeah, hence why Sabretooth visits Wolverine each year now instead, because he was like, how dare you do this to me? This is unacceptable. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more times that Wolverine kind of embarrassed his villains intentionally and unintentionally, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, blew up Dracula. If you've been surprised by Dracula appearing as a Wolverine villain in his current 2020 series, don't be. These two actually have a lot of history, and the mutants themselves have also tangled with vampires in general in the past. Old Man Logan even faced Dracula before, when mutants were disappearing and he was on the trail of tracking down his good pal and one of his sidekicks back in the day, Jubilee. This time around, however, Dracula seems to be interested in harnessing Wolverine's blood for its healing properties, and using the blood to help all vampires walk in the daylight without danger of going up in flames and perishing. Wolverine, however, literally blew up Dracula's well-laid plans when he took part in a plan to turn his body into a bomb. Well, more a devoid of consciousness clone body. This body was then offered to Dracula by his less than faithful servant Omega Red, which means instead of walking in the daylight, much of Drax's following instead went up in smoke, as Wolverine's clone's blood was altered to be like liquid sunshine to the vamps, thick with photonic cells, and so he became a dirty bomb. Or well, his clone became a dirty bomb. Number 7. Avon Calling. Not necessarily a great super villain of Wolverine's per se, but in issue number 30 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine managed to embarrass a whole team of Madripoorian militia and palace guards when he was dealing with the masterminds behind the Lazarus Project. As he and his allies aim to infiltrate the palace and confront General Koi, Broker, not to be confused with the Power Broker, and Dr. Page, Wolverine walks right up to the guard, and when he asks who goes there, answers Avon Calling. Wolverine can be nonchalant and make jokes here because he's got Karma on his team. Rather than respond with an attack, Karma basically takes hold of the guard's mind and then has him take them into the palace under the guise of his prisoners. Of course, this ruse doesn't last for too long, but it does last long enough to get them into the palace at least, and to basically where they need to go. Number 6. Ruined Merchant's Auction. When Wolverine donned his patch disguise to return once more to Madripoor, it was quickly revealed to him that everyone kinda already knew who he was. And while he had come to save a former teammate from being auctioned off as a weapon, he himself ended up on the auctioning block. But although the merchant saw his presence as an opportunity, in the end he realized his mistake, as Wolverine didn't just get away with Maverick as intended, but pretty much ruined his whole auction and Merchant's whole catalog besides. You can check out how badly Wolverine ruined this party by checking out issues number 9 and 10 of the 2020 Wolverine series. Number 5. Resisted the change. Wolverine's healing factor doesn't just protect him from severe injuries, it also protects him against supernatural related monster rules such as how they dictate transformations. And if he does end up getting affected by said rules, the change is typically only temporary for him. Eventually his healing factor will basically cure him. Case in point, when Old Man Logan faced off with Dracula during his hunt for Jubilee. Dracula managed to attack Wolverine and even bite him in this second volume of Old Man Logan, but the joke was on Drac. Wolverine's healing factor protected him from giving into vampirism, and we learned that he was immune to said bite and its effects. Sorry, Dracula. In the end, Wolverine came out on top, managing to later on decapitate Dracula. Obviously, he came back, but for the Prince of Darkness, King of Lies, Lord of the Undead, this was a pretty embarrassing defeat. Especially as he bit him and then he was like, yes, this didn't work, but that's fine. I'm sure it's taking all of your healing factor to fight off the vampirism. I don't know if it was actually taking all of his healing factor. He did look a little rough, but I feel like Wolverine was like, yeah, sure, bub, all of my healing factor. Number 4. Bad karaoke for Maverick and Merchant. Later on in the current Wolverine series, Maverick would take a job from Merchant, deciding in the end to work with him despite Merchant attempting to auction him off previously, and thereby putting Maverick in the crosshairs of Wolverine. With the two at odds fighting over information stored on a Krakoan bug, Wolverine in the end decided to let Maverick think he stole that bug back from him and his friend CIA agent Jeff Bannister, only for Maverick to learn later while handing it over to Merchant that the bug was actually wiped clean and the information on it replaced with tons of Johnny Cash karaoke, likely taken from performances at the Green Lagoon's karaoke night. Oh boy. Number 3. Omega Red versus the Wolverines. You mess with the Wolverine, you get a bunch of them that you have to deal with. You get all the Wolverines. As was evident when Omega Red came to Krakoa seeking to claim what his mutant given right was, to take refuge on the new mutant island nation. And, you know, not be condemned or anything, even though he did bad stuff in the past. However, not everyone was able to forgive and forget when it came to his past, namely Wolverine. Still suspicious of Omega Red, once it seemed as though he'd seen him appear outside of Krakoa and kind of trap him in ice, Wolverine was ready to confront him, already having an uneasy feeling about his former nemesis since pretty much day one. However, when Wolverine explained what had happened to him, to his family, they weren't ready to let him go in alone. He was joined by Daken and Gabby, who both showed Omega Red how easy it was to sneak up on him and get him in a trap. In the end, the discussion had to be tabled, but it was pretty fun to see the look on his face when the Wolverine family came together to attack him. If you were wondering where Laura was, by the way, she'd likely still be in the vault at this time, as per her adventures in the 2019 X-Men series, which is why she wasn't there. Otherwise, I'm sure Laura would also be there. Number 2. Found the perfect match for Solemn. After it was revealed revealed that Solemn had taken Logan's Muramasa blade and ended up giving one such blade to the Iraqi pirate, Severe, during Solemn's escape from him, Wolverine tracked Solemn down. He confronted Solemn and was convinced to take on Sever with him together. Later, Solemn bailed on this confrontation in typical Solemn fashion, it seems. However, Wolverine had a few tricks up his sleeve. Realizing that he and Solemn were fairly even matched, he decided to call in some reinforcements. Wolverine went to the White Queen, Emma Frost, and had her join him in their confrontation of Solemn, which she was happy to do as she had her own score to settle with him. They pursued Solemn to the sliver of remaining Araco Island on Earth where he was hiding out. And let's just say that while Wolverine and Solemn could likely fight against one another all day to only really reach a stalemate, Emma was out of Solemn's league. She interrogated him, much to his dismay and embarrassment, because Emma of course can easily access almost anyone's hidden dirty secrets and desires, no matter how dirty and secret and hidden they are. So now she knows everything about Solemn, whether she wanted to or not. Number 1. Ultimate Family Jewels. Oh boy. Of course, a lot of embarrassing moments would come from the Ultimate Universe, wouldn't they? This one hails from issue number 12 of the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Sabretooth face off, only for Wolverine to completely embarrass Victor in this fight. As Sabretooth holds Wolverine beneath the water, making him suffocate and killing his brain cells, Wolverine counterattacks by going for his, family jewels, as he calls them. His retort to Sabretooth mocking how he'll never be considered a brainiac now turns to tears and pain as Wolverine responds that at least he's smart enough to cover his family jewels in a fight before he tackles Sabretooth off a cliff. Wow, what a way to finish a fight.